this second Friday, it's the second Friday. It is it's the second Friday. It is the vote that is coming up at 7 o'clock. Really good show. We've got a really full show tonight, and we've got some great people on. So at 6 o'clock, we have our first two guests. We have our guest Cuqui Rivera of the Latino Action Network, and she's going to be talking about 20 years of the Latino Action Network, and then later in this conversation, we're going to be joined by Chris Duran and Joe Jackson, and they're going to be discussing with everybody else, and hopefully Cuqui is here for this conversation as well, a conversation on the history of Blacks and Latinos, talking about some recent controversies, recent histories, right? Really histories of working together.
Some solidarity.
Right, histories of unity and solidarity and current tensions that, sometimes we need to look at what solidarity means in light of tensions, not just in Newark, where we had a program last week on last Wednesday that talked about some controversies, with students and kids. But there's some stuff that's around the country. There's some stuff out of Los Angeles, and I think that every now and then we need to really come together and figure out, what have we done and where we are and where we're going. So I think that's going to be a great conversation. 7 p.m. We're followed by the vote, and it's going to be a very lively conversation with Reverend Conrad Tiller, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are going on that should be entertaining and informative. And at 8 o'clock, we have Harriet Tubman's great grandnieces, Adrianne Jones Roderick and Michele Jones Galvin, talking about the legacy of Harriet Tubman.
Today is the anniversary of the departure of Harriet Tubman to the land of the ancestors. 110 years to this day.
Wait, and it's interesting because you're like, only 110 years ago?
Yeah.
You think
other questions. This legacy that we have in trying to overcome the horrors of the genocidal slavery that we went through is not an old legacy the way our detractors would like to say as we punched them in the face with reparations.
Right. That's one of those things where it's like, wait, only 110 years ago? That's like just too. When you think Harriet Tubman, you think slavery, you think, oh, she 300 years ago, right? And it's like she died a little over 100 years ago. So, but getting into the show, I think that Zaid, you can introduce this segment, and I know that you were very excited about this for a while. I know that Cuqui, we would love having you on. We love having you on the show. We always love having you on the show. And Zaid,
Cuqui, one of our heavyweight
highly of you when you are here. He speaks highly of you when we're talking about getting you on the show. So when you come up in the comments, he's always so. Zaid, do the introductions to a friend of our show, to a very good friend of the show, and our friend Cuqui Rivera.
Well, I want to remind everybody also before we dive into our content with Cuqui, our political content. This is a hip hop talk show. Cuqui Rivera is one of the baddest DJs around, too, of our generation. She can DJ her West Africa off. I'm telling you, right?
I'm yet to hear her.
And she's done it for us in context of struggle, right? And so she's the real package. So we're really glad to have her. It would be dope if we had her at the end of the show at the beginning, because at the end, Cuqui, is when we really get into the hip hop stuff. And you would love those conversations. And we've said that before. I always big you up in that way. But last weekend, the Latino Action Network had its annual conference, and it was good to be back in live space with our folks in the conference and all the folks who they have touched and do touch on a regular basis from all up and down the state. And it also marked a particular watershed in terms of their history that I wanted Cuqui to lift up too. So Cuqui, let's just jump right in. Let's tell everybody about where we are with the mighty Latino Action Network. What happened last week? What were our important takeaways? And this working group anniversary, right? That's something that's important to talk about. I have a relationship with the UN working group on Africa, on African people, right? So there's plenty to talk about with that. So why don't you just jump on in and give us a recap of last week and why that was so important.
So, hello, family. It's really great to be back. It's a blessing to be with family here every chance we can. And we certainly had a wonderful an event this past Saturday in Rutgers, New Brunswick. I run the Criminal Justice Reform Committee over there, and I was able to put in the chat here a snapshot of what we've done in the last year, in fact, and how much we've done. The first link is the handout, which is about 10 pages, and it shows you all of the things that Lan was involved with. And the second one is an opinion editorial that I wrote as a guest columnist for the Star Ledger the day, and I was writing on police murder, and it was the day that Najee Seabrooks was killed in Patterson. So it was viciously ironic, disgusting, and exhausting to have that happen that way. And the next day we sit in our event and try to keep our heads together. The thing that Zaid talks about with 20 years later is related to the silos that we see today. And that means that in a number of arenas, we still stay in our corners, the Black and brown communities. And there's many rooms that I've been in where they say, well, we've never gotten together. And for some strange reason, unless you've been hanging out with Cuqui, you really don't realize that 20 years ago we were together. And we were together as a beacon for the entire country. And we were together in the subject area of mass incarceration, which is not education or poverty or wealth or housing or none. It was mass incarceration, where we was fully side by side in message and posture and unity in dealing with mass incarceration here in the state of New Jersey. And what was ironic about our assembly this past Saturday is that it was brought to my attention that it's been 20 years since this movement started. With that said, as the campaign coordinator of that effort, where it was called the New Jersey Community and Corrections Working Summit Impacting Communities of Color. If you open up that the criminal justice link, the first one, on the very first page, you will have a link to that report and see the unity that was there and see the work that was done, see who was involved, and realize that from 20 years to now, while we were so very closely together at that time, we've already started to go backwards in our own unity. And we started to have different lenses to things again. So it has been what seems to be my life mission, is to keep us together, because we can't win unless we are together. The criminal justice handout will show you so many things that are relevant to our unity. And I don't really know if you wanted me to go down all of those things, Zaid, because I believe we're short on time, because there really is a lot of things that Lan has been involved with, and Lan has never and never will work in silos. Mm-hmm. So if anybody's wondering about that, I'm saying it here. We do not work in silos, and our successes don't just belong to us. Our successes belongs to the movement.
And what does that mean, that like your successes don't work in silos? Can some examples would be good, right? Like especially you're talking about, because a lot of people might not even understand, right? Like many people don't understand that there's been always a lot of unity and struggle that goes back, like all the way back, right? So can you give us some of those examples and how that naturally just worked?
Well, in my own family, I got all colors, shapes, and sizes. In my children, in your children, in my cousins, in the neighbors. We when we're down there in struggle, it doesn't matter where you come from. It matters that you're in struggle. So that's one example. The other example, again, is what I'm pointing to in this criminal justice package. If you open up the link to that report from 20 years ago, which is the first link you're going to see on the first page, it's the perfect example of how unity can be built and can be successful. And that was a movement that looked at why so many Black and brown people were incarcerated, as if there were so many Black and brown people only committing crimes in the state of New Jersey, when at that time, if you would look in a uniform state police report of that time, and probably still now, you would see the same exact percentage of arrest in the white community versus Black and brown community being incarcerated at the same rate. And we're talking about like 85% of Black and brown people being in custody and white people being arrested, but finding their resources to find their way away from incarceration. So those are two examples of breaking down silos. And the rest of the thing goes into the laws that we've passed here in the state of New Jersey. Racial ethnic impact study. We passed that law back in 2013. Why are we looking at Najee Seabrooks today? If we have all of this, why are we still being tortured as a community every time we turn around with somebody else being killed in our community? If there's so much structure in the Attorney General's office that's supposed to deal with this, internal affairs, why was this happening in Paterson if there's a whole internal affairs directive that the Attorney General puts out and all these other things? If it's there to deal with it, why did this just happen? Why is there a man in Paterson Police Department that was arrested 2 or 3 years ago or brought into custody, and
where is Felix De Jesus?
Felix De Jesus, they still don't know. He's never been found. He never made it to the police. Why do these things happen?
Wait, hold on. Wait, stop. There's somebody who was brought to the Paterson Police Department.
No.
Taken into custody.
He never made it to the police department, and he's never been found since. Felix De Jesus.
Wow.
And
taken into custody by the police, but never made it to the police department.
And he's never been found still.
Was this before was this before body cameras? Was this?
This was in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it was 2016 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And still nothing. But what do we see? We see $120 million for a new police training facility. We see $8, maybe $9 million for community programs. The top program in the state of New Jersey for violence interruption is the Paterson Healing Collective, sitting next to the Newark Community Street Team. How much money did they get? And what are we trying to say that the Paterson Police Department doesn't know the Paterson Healing Collective, a hospital-based, successful, top-shelf violence interruption
program? Very good program. Very good program. In a short period of time.
How dare you? No. Paterson Police Department. How dare you, Attorney General Platkin, Governor Murphy, be silent?
And are you also talking about the recent incident that happened? Can you? I know Zaid has been talking about that. Can you just explain a little bit of context around that?
Well, maybe I should do that part because I met the young man.
Either way.
and I worked. We have a statewide coalition where we work very closely with the Paterson Healing Collective. The Paterson Healing Collective is as Cuqui described, a hospital-based violence intervention organization that has done great work in Paterson. They've been in effect about 3-4 years. They're younger than our Newark Street team, but have a comparable makeup. The street team has a wider mission because they're not just hospital-based in their intervention, but the hospital intervention work that the Paterson Healing Collective has done has been exemplary, and they've had some great success stories. They've had another near tragedy success because people don't realize how there's an element of danger in doing violence intervention work, community based, because our folks are not the police. And we're not coming in with a police message, and we're not coming in with guns. like the police. We're coming in with a message of an alternative way to live, right? Based on some real life experiences with a network of resources and services to get some of our folks out of deep, difficult situations at the end. They had a student, a younger student. I can't recall a young man's name out right now, and I've been trying to get them on the line. But they're at Patterson is in the streets today, as we right now. That's why they're not on the show. They're at City Hall this evening rallying, or they would have been on. Both Black Lives Matter Patterson and the Patterson Healing Collective. But they had a young man who actually was doing some work, talking to some young folks about this gunplay is a dead end street when a drive-by took place. Right, and he got wounded in the drive-by, seriously wounded, right? But it didn't dispel this young man, took heart and understood why his work was that important, and has continued in their ranks. Now, what happened with Najee is particularly harmful because Najee wasn't hitting the drive-by. Najee was in a mental health crisis, right? And called for his colleagues, his family in the Patterson Healing Collective. And they were there. They were texting each other. Teddy Martinez is the point man who was on the scene, texting each other in live time. Teddy is talking to the lead officer on the scene. Look, kid is saying to me, all we got to do is see our faces and he'll come out. And they would not let them have contact with this young man. He was not holding anyone hostage. He was not armed, right? He was not posing a threat to anyone in real time as you think of situations like that. There was no need for them to go in the way they did and take that young man out. And so a whole lot of us are upset about that. That's the context.
Who called the police at the beginning?
Say it again, Ed. I'm sorry.
Who called the police to start with? How did they even
He
get
did. He did.
On the premise that he thought he had a relationship, a working relationship, because let's understand this. Community violence intervention is a parallel support strategy where, folks are supposed to know their lanes and be able to work with each other.
Right.
So they knew this person was actually a colleague.
Yes.
A colleague whose organizations had kept them safer.
Yes.
Right, like because the Patterson Healing Collective, the Newark, the initiatives that we have in Newark, right, like the street team, they keep not just the public safer.
Right there, they're right there.
They keep the police. They keep the police safer,
Yes.
right? Like, and they have it. That's demonstrated that they kept the police safe.
But Zaid,
Patterson Healing Collective, you're going to get some incredible stories about the work that those young folks are doing. I'm very proud of them. Go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
But what it seems like, Zaid, is that we have some folks in the police departments that are really just not abreast of who these folks are, right? Remember, we had the same thing in Newark with Brother Ahmed Hotep. Remember when he had
Sharif?
With Sharif.
In both cases, though, Ed, here's where I have problems with that. In both cases, there were people on the scene that gave out, that made that connection. And in both cases, the police acted the wrong way. They did not act the way they should have. And so Sharif was arrested. They broke his daggone ankle, right? Lucky that didn't get worse, right? And he survived that, thankfully. And in this young man's case, it's not G's case. They didn't let them intervene at all, and they wound up killing him. They wound up killing him.
Right.
May I respond?
Yeah,
absolutely.
They don't get a damn pass. They are killing us. They don't get a pass. And if they don't know, it's because they refuse to listen. They get their little orientation every morning. They get training and training and training and training, but they don't get checked out. Is Cuqui behaving different after she got 50 trainings? They're not checking that either. They don't get that pass while they kill us.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
In fact, some of our PHC folks, our Patterson Healing Collective folks, have done intervention trainings for the Patterson Police Department.
No pass.
You can't make this up.
Yeah. So this training is not really working. So the question would be, what kind of mechanisms that can we put in
got to
place?
make some heads roll when it comes to accountability that make them understand that this is how it's going to be, right? You got to learn how to work with your community as opposed to attacking and stomping on your community, right? And if you can't work with your community and abuse your community, you're going to pay a price.
I'm gonna switch that up a little, Zay, because they know that already, right? And we've been screaming for more than 20 years that you can train me all damn day, but if I'm no good, I'm no good. So if you do not build measures in there to evaluate me, to assess me, to adjust my behavior or discipline me, you can train me till the sun goes down, but I'm gonna still be who I am. And they heard that and they've seen models where it works, and they will put money into training. How much money can you spend in training? Where is the accountability? Where is the evaluation, the assessment, the adjustment, the discipline? Where is it? When does it? This is not going to happen in a rich community, in a rich white community. This is not going to happen there.
That's right. Exactly right.
So the question would be then, what do we do about it? Because, you know, we're marching in the street. It would seem to me that we've got to go to another extreme, right? In order for it to stop, or in order for some laws to be passed, or in order for some police to go to prison, right?
That's what we're talking about with discipline.
It would seem that if this brother Najee was known to the police department, and in his mind, he thought he was calling friendlies, right? Exactly. He didn't think he was calling something that was coming to kill him, right? And if that's not the case, then the question would be, how then do, right, these particular interrupters began to organize all over the world and stage such a protest that we shut down Patterson and make a statement, right? Like that sister did in Memphis. Remember, she said she shut the bridge down until they fired those police officers, right?
Where you're in the ballpark. And that brings us back to the broader conversation, Black and Brown unity, right? Our folks are united on this in Patterson. Our folks are united on this. We have a whole statewide coalition of community-based violence intervention folks united on this. Our criminal justice reform and our police accountability folks, we're all united on this. We're all united on this, right? Yes. And the streets are hot. We were in Patterson a couple days ago. We did shut it down, right? We did shut it down, right? Why are you not there, Demo? I thought you'd be there. Lawrence have talked about this, and I was referring to earlier, that they're in the streets today. Now, that's why they're not on the air with us. So it's the streets are hot, and the pressure is on both the police leadership and on their elected leadership. Real clear, the demands that the community is making are very clear, right? They had to raise hell just to get the names of some of the officers who were involved released. There was a relent on that, and that came from the Attorney General's office, not from Patterson police leadership, right? The mayor Sayek, who has been quite wishy-washy, I must say, on this issue, and always looking to adjust his position. One minute he's with the community, another minute he's with the police. He's with the police, right? But because this is so hot and so like Tyree Nichols, so bad-looking, so embarrassing to the police, he is now starting to raise his voice on the question, well, where are the body cameras? I did say I wanted body cameras on all Patterson police officers. Where are that? So he's trying to raise his voice to save a little face, and the fact that we're in his behind, right, to push for those body cameras. But we're pushing for more than that, pushing a whole restructuring of the police department, pushing for civilian oversight of that police department, and pushing for a federal investigation, not just of the case, but of the Patterson Police Department to get a consent decree to come in, like what we did in here in Newark. So we're really clear on what we're doing. It's just a damn shame that it's happening. It shouldn't be happening.
But what I'm talking about, Zaid, I'm talking about something that is tangible right now, based on the fact that this brother was known to these police, right? He thought he was calling them friendly, right? Something has to be done, because if you can kill people who believe that they are sanctioned, right, by the very police department to be their partners, and then at the end of the day, what they have shown in real time is that doesn't matter.
That's right. And it's
right?
disregard.
So something has to be done that says that this is not acceptable. And I know the long-term stuff got it, right? But I'm sure that those who are in those organizations have to be afraid for their own lives at this point.
And that's real stuff.
Right.
What you just said, Ed, is real stuff. These are young people, right?
Right.
And Najee was kind of like, Najee was 22, right? A
Man,
lot of the kids in the Healing Collective are younger than that.
that's
right?
incredible.
And then all of them, and most of them have been justice impacted, right?
Yeah.
And they have been severely traumatized by that.
Right.
Some of them are rethinking, why am I doing this if this is what can happen to me?
That's
right. So what you're calling long term, we're pushing to make sure it doesn't happen in the long term. Some of this stuff should happen in the short term. That's what Memphis is telling us.
So there's 2 points I want to raise here to us as a unified community. And that is, number one, in these 20 years that have gone on, New Jersey has really been a beacon for the country with a number of laws that we have passed, bail reform, isolated confinement, and much, much more. Racial ethnic impact studies in every criminal justice bill. But what you see 20 years later is the legislature backsliding. And that's what that article is about, that the laws that we have passed, bail reform in particular, where the Supreme Court in the same breath says there's no increase in crime. In fact, there's less crime. Don't look at the news, but there's less crime in the state of New Jersey. That we are going backwards as far as the legislature goes, as far as laws goes. The laws that we still have yet to have seen become fully implemented, by the way. So that's point number one. Point number two, which is in the top, when you open up that criminal justice business that I have in the link there, the package that I handed out in the summary, the very first line says, continue to support, educate, and empower the 83,000 voters that we helped pass a law of that for formerly incarcerated people to vote. The same way we take to the streets for rallies after a tragedy, a horrific tragedy has happened, is the same way we need to get to them streets and drag Cuqui to that poll and vote certain people out. Not just at the state level, because we don't even go to primaries, and we work very hard both in the Black and brown communities to get the vote out. But the minute we change this leadership here in a way that is not just at the state level, but definitely at the local level, because where is the trouble? At the local level. So while we do these statewide campaigns to get out, vote, and empower and educate and all this stuff, we have to turn out in those polls the way we turn out in those rallies before the tragedy happens.
Right.
And our young world here says, for what? Every time I turn around, I'm either getting beat down or killed. For what? I got something else for you. That's what they're going to say.
Right.
But this is a genuine piece of the answer. And the minute you start changing that leadership over there, be real clear that Cuqui may have made Zaid some promises, but if she gets in there and don't keep them promises, she got to go.
Right. Right.
Those are real answers.
And that's another piece about Amber that I want to lift up. We're talking about Memphis. We had Amber Sherman on a little while ago, and I'm so proud of that young lady, right? And they continue to move forward. There's some ordinances that are about to get shifted as a consequence of their continued protests that are happening in the immediate future, within the next few weeks, not the next several years, because they're doing what they're doing. But Amber is a young elected official as well. She's not just Black Lives Matter. She's a young county Democrat who's training younger county Democrats with her radical orientation. That's a bad little daughter. I'm very proud of her, right? And that's the piece that we have been trying to get over to our younger activists who are great with mobilization. They turn out on the streets, right? In terms of follow-up, that long-term, gritty, incremental stuff that we're talking about to actually change places and spaces, that's another level of organizing and struggle and maturity that comes with some learning and some experience and willing to do a different kind of work and to grow into a different kind of maturity. And I'm proud to see that particular young organizer has that about her. It's very instructive.
Pay attention to the election. This governor ain't going to be here next election. And we're having this kind of trouble here. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to the backsliding of the Voting Rights Act. Pay attention to that. The freedoms that we have now, they're fighting to destroy them as we speak. I think it was you, Zaid, who talked about another training facility in Florida with
Georgia, Cop City.
I don't know how many hundred millions they're getting
my God.
to
Cop
deliver
City
or to
Georgia.
build a statewide so-called Florida, don't believe that, institution to train police how to disband or destroy protesters.
Legitimate protests. That's right.
Honest, you know more than me about that.
Actually,
and that is not for Florida. That is for everybody.
Yeah, that's right. Now, Georgia, yesterday was the National Day of Solidarity and Action with the Cop City protest. Cop City is this beautiful green acreage in the Atlanta, Georgia area that has been designated to become a big training institution. That's literally called Cop City, to train police officers in the putting down of certain kinds of protests, right? Things is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, going to destroy beautiful green acreage. And there were some forest defenders who were there to protest that. Nonviolent forest defending. I mean, that's something that comes with environmental justice. That's a fundamental approach to civil disobedience when it comes to environmental justice. Manuel Terrain, also known as Tortuguita, a young Panamanian-born activist, right? Black and brown unity. Here we go, right? Gets blown away, shot to pieces 13 times, and a lot of the defenders are being charged with domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism, right? So why we have to push hard in a non-negotiable way is because the stakes are getting greater if we don't. And I know
do you think this is a good time to bring our other guest in?
Yeah, bring them on in. Bring them on in. I know we kind of went in on that. Right on.
All right. So and Zaid, do you want to introduce both of our new people? Chris, you there? Chris Duran?
Yeah, he's there.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, perfect.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say this is the perfect time to segue. Zaid, you are the perfect person to segue, to make that segue in. We are really pleased to have both of these guests join us. There was a forum the mayor did on Wednesday, Ed and the conference on the National Black Political Convention, among other organizations, put that together, and it was on Black and Latino unity, right? And how there was unity through struggle, not like fake unity, like, oh, just hang out, but no, like there's real political struggle, and there is not just a recent history, but there are ongoing histories of like the necessity of that movement politics.
And John, before we go any further, let's thank both of these brothers publicly for being a part of that as well.
Yeah, Cuqui was originally supposed to be in. She had a schedule conflict when we changed the date, so that's why we're keeping her right there. She's one of the experts. Perfect. That's right.
Right, because we think a lot of these. I really do think that many people, young people, just don't recognize like the politics of our community, right? And how they're generationally, maybe, given stuff on the internet, stuff that, the ways in which people identify. I think that there's a real interesting conversation about what this means politically from younger people who are like high school age, older people who might be who have different mindsets, right? And people who have been in the activist movement. So Zaid, the introduction's all yours, but I did appreciate both of these people for being there out on Wednesday. Chris, known him for many years and always very happy to see him, to see the work that he's done over the years and grow, right? So look forward to seeing a lot of stuff that you do in the future as well.
And I've got to say, your contribution was enormous.
Absolutely.
I mean, the feedback that
Felipe
we
loved it.
got y'all
The elder in the room loved it.
was incredible. And I think Joe, you wasn't afraid to call yourself downright brother straight out. I think that people was like, wow, you know what I mean, and that verbiated with those young people who were having their own issues. And what can you say about Chris? This young brother is brilliant, and we're looking for some incredible things from you, Chris. I think you know that. There's
get a scholarship together. We want to see some of that.
Well, that's right. We're gonna do what we can to help him because he's a brilliant brother, and I know how much the mayor always enjoy when you come on the show with him. He sits back and just lets you talk. So we appreciate both of you brothers. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So let's just jump in. I'll jump in with a long view because the elder who's not on the panel, who quiet as it's kept, is actually just stumbled into his 70s very gracefully. The one and only Felipe Luciano, who's our keynote. Felipe, of course, is the co-founder of the Young Lords and of the Last Poets, right? And I had to kick myself upside the head because I forgot to tell Felipe to bring some of his lyrical weapons that really close it out powerful, And he said, "Damn, you should have told me." But the Young Lord Party was the Puerto Rican answer to the Black Panther Party. Has a context. That has a context with the original Rainbow Coalition that was pulled together by none other than the immortal Fred Hampton in that epic year of 1969. And of course, 1969, right here in Newark, taking full note of that was our own Imam, our own leader, Amiri Baraka, who pulled together the Black and Puerto Rican Convention. That set the stage for two things. One, the local, all politics are local, the local united front and mobilization that would put Ken Gibson in office and beat at the polls after doing battle in the streets. I'll make that plain. Beat at the poll after doing battle in the streets. The gangster apartheid that was here in Newark and here very much in City Hall in the personality of Hugh Adonisio and on the streets by one Anthony Imperiality, for those of you old enough to remember how that used to go down. And in those battles on the streets, right, the Young Lords and the Committee for Unified Newark made a pact to have each other's back when it came to coming under attack from forces like that. And that made the forces of reaction in this town understand that this is a new day. Our folks are willing to stand up, not just at the polls, but if necessary, to defend ourselves. Self-defense, one of our principal tenets back then, right? Defend ourselves by force of arms. We will do that too. So it was important to a powerful expression of Black and brown unity in real clear terms. And over the years, we've seen other expressions of that. Chris and Joe represent two contemporary expressions of that. Chris, and when he was the Concerned 44 at Seton Hall, Black and brown students fighting for the reclamation of Africana studies and Latin American studies, right? And that battle is not over by no stretch of the imagination. And Joe is one of the spearhead lead forces for the ACLU for a campaign called Counselors Not Cops to demilitarize some of our schools. And there's some wonderful young folks that he has been working with. Make the Road, New Jersey, some powerful young Latinx students, and the MAPSO Freedom School who are Black, brown, and white. In the Maplewood Seton Hall, Maplewood South Orange school system, right? So we'll let them each tell them about that. But they're also, Chris and they've already started having conversations about what they think should happen next, right? So y'all jump in and explain whatever you want to explain about where you're at in your own respective work and how do you think this work should go forward?
I'm happy to go first, and I greatly appreciate being on the show, y'all, and also being a part of the conversation on Wednesday was incredibly powerful. So, I think that it's great that you guys are following up on this conversation and, keeping the conversation going. Also very happy that you're keeping Cuqui around. I was worried that she was going to bounce at 6:30, but I'm glad that she's still part of the conversation because she obviously brings so much expertise. So hey, everybody, my name is Joe Johnson. I'm the policy counsel with the ACLU of New Jersey. To kind of start off, I'll identify myself. I identify as a Black man. My father is Black. My mother is white. I grew up in the Black neighborhood of a predominantly white area. My perspective growing up was very limited to Black and white. And it wasn't until I left that area to go to college and law school that I really started to engage with people of other cultures and start to learn their stories. And start to learn a little bit about the history of unity and solidarity that we have amongst our cultures. I read something recently that identified the first step of practicing solidarity as learning other people's stories. And I do truly feel that I'm still in this first phase. So happy to be amongst so many great elders that can, help continue my education. And then in my role at the ACLU of New Jersey, I work on racial justice issues at a historically white organization. And I think one of the key tenets that I try to make sure I'm carrying forward in my work is very similar to what Cuqui said, making sure that we aren't working in silos, right? I don't want to do anything if I haven't run it by my partners, if I haven't run it by other communities to figure out how it's going to impact people and how they feel about it. So that's where I am with the work right now. We do a bunch of things that, are really happening at the state level for the most part. But as we've mentioned, a lot of the problems really are local. And we have to figure out how to address some of the more local issues as opposed to always trying to address things at the state level. So I'll pause for there and let Chris go.
Yeah, peace, everybody. All power to the people. Free all political prisoners and prisoners of war. I say that just to start off because of the fact that one of the biggest examples of Black and brown unity is in the fact that anti-colonial struggle requires that we free our political prisoners and prisoners of war against this U.S. empire and against our collective movement. Just in terms of starting off, that I think Baba Zaid told a lot of it. My father is from Chile. My mother is from Ukraine. And a lot of my revolutionary consciousness, my political consciousness came to being here in the United States by connecting the history of U.S. imperialism to both those countries and then to the global South generally, to U.S. imperialism and colonialism as it happens right here in our communities here in the Newark area, obviously in Jersey generally, and there's discussions about Cop City, literally stuff happening in the continuing colonial project of the United States of America, or United Snakes of America rather. And one of the biggest reasons why I was able to connect this in a very concrete way was through the struggle to free political prisoners, particularly those who were in the Black Panther Party. My mentor, a man who is family to me now, is a man named Adrianne Smith. He's part of the Newark chapter of the Black Panther Party. Baba Zaid knows him very well. Myself and Imani, who I was on the panel with the other day, we're adopted cubs of the party.
Yes.
In the words of Adno. But also with that, the shout out to Ramon Rivera, who's one of the founders of the Newark chapter of the Young Lords.
Mm-hmm.
And
trying to track it down.
Yeah, that's so in terms of Black and brown unity, there's a rich history right here in this area, and in the same time period where you see Black studies emerge, Latin American studies emerge, that emerged in the context also of a broader anti-colonial movement that was happening at the same time. That was in large part the vanguard of that in the community was the Young Lords and the Black Panther Party, but also other organizations. So that's part of the continuity that I think there's a responsibility for my generation, to preserve, because there's a lot of young people who do not have this history, and obviously this is very deliberate. Daruba bin Wahad gets on, he starts criticizing young people for not having a knowledge of this history, but it's very deliberate. COINTELPRO separated us from this history, You know, the government flooding crack heroin into our communities.
He created what he called a political vacuum.
Really, you know, the prison industrial complexes, you know, explosion through the 80s and 90s. You know, there's a deliberate and also one of COINTEL's stated purposes of separating the youth from the revolutionary history. You know, so there are deliberate reasons as to why, you know, people my age don't have a connection to this history, and why we fall into hashtag movements, why we fall into habits where we mobilize, but we don't necessarily know any organizing principles to sustain struggle. And also, you know, why we get into things of, you know, careerism and things like that. And so I think things going forward is trying to, you know, be able to make sure that students going forward have resources in terms of organizing around their own conditions.
I was going to bring up, relating to what you're saying, right? Like you mentioned a lot of things that, talking about careerism. You're talking about, and you're talking about like not having organizing principles. Doesn't this assume like a reason why people organize? And what I'm getting at is, like James Baldwin wrote in Evidence of Things Not Seen. He talked, and I'm paraphrasing. He said that he predicted that in the future, race would be a political question, like racial identity. And when both of you were describing your own identities, right? Like it seems like both of you made choices, right? Like both of you could have been adopted. People are like, hey, I'm mixed race, right? And that's in South Africa, people color, right? There are people who are very like Walter White of the founder of the NAACP could pass for white, and there's been this history of making choices. But I think
Hey, John,
yeah.
we're having some issues with your mic, man. Did you?
Oh, can you hear me?
Did you change your computer or something? You were coming through real clear.
Headphones, but I'll put them back in.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, then you wait. Hold on a second. But no, just continue. Someone jump in and continue the conversation while I get my mic straight. Can you hear me better now?
Yep, you sound much better.
All right. So, and one of the things that I was, and it's good. The sound is good now. The sound is good now.
Now you going in and out again.
But can you hear me? Yeah.
Now you
or no?
good. Now you good. Yeah, you
Okay.
good.
Okay. So, a lot of times people talk about how race can be, for many, a choice or a political question. It's a matter of political identity. Like racial identity and political identity are becoming more and more of a choice, right? Like, you know, I'm a teacher. A lot of my students are mixed race, right? Like people who are Black and Latino, right? Like their mother is white, their father is Latino. They're from the Caribbean, right? Like a lot of times Dominicans may identify as white or Dominican or both, right? Or Black, right? Like I think that, is there a thing within the younger generation that the organizing principles that you're talking about, the political principles that you're talking about, is that really at root in terms of unity? As in, if you identify more as Ukrainian and not Ukrainian as in certain types of historical struggle there, but as in Ukrainians, if they come to the United States, they're white, right? There's certain privileges of white and phenotypically white skin. So when I was a kid, if someone's Puerto Rican, it was like, oh, if someone called them white, they'd be a fight. It's like, you white? No, I'm Puerto Rican. And it would be attitude with that, even if they were pale, right? Do you think that there's a level of new identification? Like now I've seen a lot more biracial people saying that they are biracial as opposed to Black, right? Like as in, no, I'm biracial. My mom's white, and they would define themselves politically that way, as opposed to Black. I'm a debate coach. One of my coaches is Dominican, defines himself as Black because he's like, I'm Black, right? So what do you think about the racial identifications that go along with the class struggles and the specific organizing principles and the things, Chris, that you were talking about, or Joe, you were talking about, or Cuqui, that you were talking about? It seems like the three of you are talking about a notion of identity that has a lot of nuance in it, but is rooted in a certain type of struggle?
Can I take that? Can I take the first crack at that? We tend to disconnect the fact that we live in a white supremacist structure and design. Our families are broken. Our housing is broken. Our fathers have been removed from our families. We struggle in every way, and it's by design. Our education is not there. We do not understand the greatness that lives inside of our very souls from our ancestors. We do not understand our greatness because we have not been taught that. Chris got lost. That's not what we're taught. There's that. What I used to do back in the day, and this is a trick if you want to do some organizing, go to any classroom, and I don't care if it's heavily black or white or whatever, but I would do this. They would bring me in when there were riots. They did it in Highland Park and other places where they was having riots with Russian and Jewish kids. I went in that classroom, and there was about 40 kids in that classroom, and I took a piece of chalk. I said, hey, Joe, tell me where your grandmother and grandfather from your mother's side and from your father's side, what country they come from. And I would write that country on the blackboard. And I went through every kid, and that's the question. Where did your grandmother from your father and your mother, what country did they come from? And it's a guarantee that whatever room you're in, you're going to cover the globe of the planet Earth. So if you start from that premise and that root, all of that, that's the first organizing tool right there. You don't even know who you're sitting next to. And it's really nice for me to say, in some ways, that they need to teach Chris got lost. Okay, I'm gonna get worse. So Joe or Chris, jump in there, please. But that's a tool that you could use to teach elementary children, let alone our own grown selves.
I'll hop in real quick on the, is racial identity a choice question? I think the quote, my answer is more of a question, and that's really, does society allow for it to be a choice? And I'm 29 years old, so in my 29 years, I can only speak.
Whoa! Wait a second, Chris. Say that again, my brother. You said our society allow it to be a choice. Damn.
Right. I mean, because you have to think about it. I mean, in the past, the only people who would have been able to pretend that they aren't black are people who are very white passing, right? If you look like you might be black in the slightest, that's how society has treated you.
This is America. This is the land of one drop.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, as a kid, my father taught me correctly that I needed to grow up as a black man. I was going to be viewed as a black man, and I was going to have a target on my back because of that. So that's how I was taught. That's how I was raised, and I think that that's how most black people of any percentage are raised to feel in this country. So now there's a question of if more children nowadays are identifying as biracial. I think that is it because they feel that they have the ability to make a choice, that they can make a choice that's going to be respected?
I think part of the pushback on this is that we find, right, that if you have a certain political, if you espouse certain things, right, we know that there Ted Cruz, we know that there are many people who, we know that there are many black people, right? We know many people we have many African immigrants, right? We have many people whose relationship with blackness and whiteness is different. And those results, like, I'm not saying that African immigrants can't be shot to death, right? But there's also a level of negotiation with white supremacy that we saw in Memphis with black people, right? We see certain negotiations with white supremacy. Like, in other words, I was working with a series of undocumented students, and they were coalition around the fight. And, I asked the question, right? Are you taking this fight so that you can integrate within an oppressive structure, but have a part in it, have privilege within the structure, or are you fighting to overturn an unjust system of privilege, right? And I think that when Chris is talking about careerist, isn't a careerist like when you're talking about a careerist, isn't it someone who's making a political choice when it comes to race and class and identity and what they espouse and what they go for in terms of how they're able to negotiate with a system that oppresses a lot of people who look like them, but they can negotiate places for themselves. And I think that's what I'm really going to, right? Like, it's not just about the racial identity of I'm biracial, not biracial. It is the political components that come with it, right? But the things that you will
Police
question
bust you
versus the
upside the
things
head.
don't question, or maybe they won't, right? Like most people aren't going to get bashed up by the head by the police. Like, not if we're going out. Most of us, it's not going to happen to. It happens to too many of us, disproportionately too many of us. But there are people who successfully negotiate with white supremacy and always have. And are there more opportunities, especially when you see a lot of people choosing a certain identity, right? Like, when you deal with the person who killed Trayvon, right? Like, and how they identified
George
and
Zimmer.
what that meant, right? And what that meant, right? Like, are people making choices? Like I'm talking about Black people too, in terms of Memphis police, or in terms of how we identify and the politics that you talk about, like in terms of careerists. That's kind of what I'm getting towards.
Let's let Joe answer.
I will pass that to Chris to see if he has anything to say as it relates to the careerist aspect.
Yeah. Also, Cuqui's not talking about this, Chris, by the way. I ain't get lost on
that. No, not that, Chris.
I mean, shit, I wish I was in America, but, there's that. I'm sorry for cursing. I apologize for that. But, no, I mean, I do think it, in large part, it is a political choice as well as, like, an identity choice. I think all those things are, like Cedric Robinson talks about how, like, race and class aren't, like, separate. They're, like, constitutive. So they both play into each other. And so, like, a lot of folks who come from Latin America, like, first of all, they don't. Yeah. So, like, we don't necessarily, or our families, they don't necessarily investigate heavy into the history of colonialism in our own country. So a lot of us who have parents that might identify maybe in one country as mestizo, as soon as they come to the U.S., if they can pass for white, then they might be white. If they pass, if they're Latino, because the U.S. defines them as Latino, then they're that, even though it's not actually a race. But it's like, the United States is using its own conception of race that it then projects onto the world, and it can because of the fact that U.S. imperialism dominates the world, and particularly Latin America and the Caribbean. But there is definitely a component of political choice when you also have neocolonialism happening in these countries. When you have neocolonialism happening in a city like Atlanta, if you're talking about an internal colonialist perspective. But if you're talking about external colonialist perspective, you can look at half of the leaders of Latin America and the Caribbean are folks who are in the pockets of the CIA.
Well, let's not forget that Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States.
Exactly. So, there is a political choice, and also in these countries, the racial structure does make, and there are different racial categories in a lot of these different countries, not just black and white, but there is still a very clear, like, color hierarchy. And a lot of times, if you can, what would be termed as, like, marrying up or, like, improving the race would be, becoming lighter. And so a lot of people do make that with a conscious class choice. But even if that wasn't there, and if it was a if there weren't that many, white people in the country or lighter skinned people in the country, there still is the political choice to, I don't want to say it, but, like, sell out. I mean, people do make the political choice to have interests that are aligned with those who have power and not with the masses of their people. If I chose to go be a Wall Street broker, which I very much would have access to, I could do that, but I would be selling out my people. I would be selling out the masses of people, whether they be black and brown in the context of a place like like the Newark area, but in general, if I was talking about Chile. And so I think that again, that career aspect is also part of the thing, that the way that the system also perfects the way that it can filter out people into having careers that will integrate them into the system. And no matter, I mean, sometimes they are folks who are darker skinned, but the interests still betray the masses of people. So I think it is both race and class, and also gender and sexuality as well. All those things are constitutive. They can't necessarily be separated.
And so,
Go ahead. Yeah.
no. And Joe, do you want to add to that, or Cuqui to add to that? Because
I just remind us that in 2008, the ACLU National sued the Puerto Rico Police Department because it was the most corrupt police force in this country. There's a federal monitor down there, and if you think we got troubles, it's pretty heavy. It's heavy stuff that we're dealing with. So I just wanted to add that, and I believe that consent decree is still in place on the island, to say the least.
And what I was really thinking toward, right, is that when we're talking about Black and Latino unity, right, when we're talking about the unity that happened historically, we are really talking about having similar ideologies and understanding why we needed to unify, right? I mean, just looking at the nature of the struggle and being like, we chose a side, right? And maybe certain struggle is not like, well, we're not choosing a side, we're forced in a side. But I think maybe now many people think they have choices as to which side they would be on, and choosing that because there are legitimate opportunities to do lots of different things, right? And we see this. We see like when Herschel Walker is nominated by the Republican Party, or you have you have Tim Scott who can espouse certain things, and have certain interests and have a certain ideology that he thinks is good for his constituents where he is, right? And so I'm just saying that like maybe what we always need to emphasize is, well, if we're disunified, is the politics disunified? Like, or is it? I mean, is it a racial disunification, or is it a political disunification that puts it into race? And part of what made me think about that was when Amir Baraka supported, Gibson and was a Black nationalist, but then after Gibson was elected, and forgive me if I'm messing this up, Zay, or anyone who understands better than me to correct this, but he became a third world Marxist largely because he thought that the nationalism allowed us to look at racial politics in a way that undermined our actual overall interest, right? And when he became what I believe he called a third world Marxist, was about looking at the way in which identity is used against us to undermine our interests. And maybe I'm not making sense, but does that seem like that might be what's going on when there is disunity, when there is like these flare-ups, whether it be what happened in Los Angeles or what happened, in different places like in Newark or whatever, right? Is it because of the stuff that went on, like you have identity being used to obscure where the struggle's at?
We live, we're born, we marinate in the womb in pain and chaos. That's where we come from. It brings me back again to the design of white supremacy, to the structure and the design. We are finished when tragedy happens, but it's because we can't take any more. We have to understand that pain and chaos is what's been built in us, not by us, but by design. So it is that design that we seem to be missing the boat. It is that design that we have champions in the legislature that backslide. It is that design. In the United States Congress, how many people of color are there?
Those numbers are down in proportion to our numbers in the population.
And here in local communities, How many people have been to city council meetings that look like simply a circus? Certainly when things like this is happening. The design and the structure of this is much stronger than we are, it seems, because it pits us against each other, and we can't wait to fight each other most of the time until the tragedy hits and we can't take any more. We say, why are we fighting each other?
That was one of the deliberate points of our gathering the other day, and something that Jim, that you just laid out, Cuqui. Why are we fighting each other? Right. That was made clear by everyone. When we move forward, we move forward. We move forward together.
Only way.
Right. We move forward together. So when we understand that we're facing the same challenges from the same system and its deliberate institutional challenges of racism and colonialism and capitalism, we can figure out how we should be getting down.
Zaid, in every rally, how do I end it? It takes who?
The village.
The whole damn village.
That's right. She said
it takes who? The whole damn village.
If I could just share my closing thought here, we are good at being we are good at unifying when we need to, right? When there's a tragedy, when something brings us together, whether it's police violence or attacks on our shared spaces, what we aren't good at is staying unified, right? It can't be something happened 5 years ago that unified us and then it stopped and then now we need to come back together. We need to keep that consistent.
Yes.
That way we don't keep falling off and having to remake the wheel every single time. Cuqui was talking about how we had a structure for this 20 years ago. We need to make sure that we don't create these structures and just allow them to fall and then have to rebuild them over and over and over again.
I'm going back further. They're going back a little further than 20 years also with the Black liberation movement, and we had cultural revolution, the Black arts movement, the Nuyorican arts movement, those were sister movements, and we did so much together, that was important, and it produced very important relationships that were not just political, right? But they were human, they were healthy, they were artistic, there was a range of relationships that developed from that reflects where we ought to go anyway. In a decolonized construct and in a decolonized consciousness, that's where we should go. So it was great to see that. So yeah, y'all can give up your closing thoughts. What are things? Chris, you actually you were actually talking to some of the students about some things y'all wanted to do together. Do you want to share what you were contemplating as a part of your closing remarks?
Absolutely. I think that I think part of that question again goes to like unifying around what, a brilliant ancestor named Kwame Ture, formerly known as Stokely Carmichael, used to always talk about the difference between mobilization and organization.
That's right.
And we can mobilize around events. We can mobilize around someone being killed. We can mobilize around things. We can mobilize around a vote. Everyone mobilize around voting for that neo-colonial puppet, Barack Obama, or Eric Adams in New York. And, so what politics are actually being sustained in an organized manner? We go vote and then we come back home, and then there's no sustained organization to actually empower our communities in a real way after that. And that's also part of the reason why, we think we won. We've got, different mayors and city council people now that look like us, and, we got them around the country. And, we think that, that those people will automatically be accountable to us when there's no mechanism to hold them accountable. There's no recall vote. And so what, sustained organized politics, is happening in between all that voting. If it's just organizing for the purpose of a vote, then that's not organization. And so one of the things that, again, my frustration is with like these students is that they do not have the resources to, again, have any sustained organization to push their demands. And so they'll, give all of their trauma in front of a public audience. But, again, what we want to do is connect them to youth organizers, in order to actually be able to push the list of demands that targets, systemic things.
Exactly.
Be able to have them articulate, what are the systemic problems? Because there's these individual problems, and we saw that at, in my undergrad, we saw them in high school. We see folks being harassed, on a racial basis, on a sexual basis. And so we want to have accountability for those events, but we also want systemic change, and we want to have power redirected in an institutional way to us. We want to have community control. One of the substantive things about like the demand of Seton Hall is for students to have control over hiring, whether it be administration or faculty, over the people who teach us, over the people who are dealing with our stuff, on a consistent basis, on an institutionalized basis. And have that be directly accountable to us in a more, democratic way. And so, we really need to get back to like ideas of, again, we talk about anti-colonialism, revolutionary nationalism, cultural nationalism, but we need to talk about, things like that. Where is power actually manifested? What is community control defined as? And I think that's one of the things missing. And unless there is that push, and using the opportunities that we have like this, we have people who are favorable to us in power, like, here in Newark, but it doesn't exist in certain other places. Mm-hmm. But using like those places where people are favorable to us to like push that more, radical line, at least at the grassroots. And I think that, there's a tremendous opportunity to do that right now with the students. And I think, that if there is unity, sort of paraphrasing the late Amiri Baraka, that that's where it'll be found.
So I know that we're getting toward the end of the segment. Now, just to Joe and Cuqui just to close us out.
Joe, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's imperative that we keep having these conversations, right? What we're talking about is the need to continue to organize and make sure that there's an organization that can carry itself. So, to the extent that we can keep having these conversations, we need to keep doing that. So thank you so much for having me and for having this conversation.
Thank you. And
so... with the first question that I was asked tonight about the 20 years anniversary of this mass incarceration movement, and I put the handout in a link here, and I beg anyone who is genuinely interested in learning organizing to read that report. Right on the front page, New Jersey Community and Corrections Working Summit Impacting Communities of Color. The answer is that I didn't give you in the beginning is that there is an intention to explore a 20 years anniversary of this movement to see where we are and to update the recommendations of that report from 20 years ago, which as you read it, you will see some of the things that we've achieved in law here now that we live in that's being reversed. A working summit is not a conference. It is not an assembly. It is not a talking heads room of lecturers. It is advocates and state departments sitting at the same table, at the same level of respect, the same level of expertise, and building a map for us to fix this again, to an action agenda and a map on how to make this go away. And let me close it with this. 20 years later, we reduced the prison population in half.
Tell it.
There are achievements there that we did together. And the thought of it is to explore a 20 years anniversary of this. But the concern is, can we break the silos enough to sit down and have a constructive summit, working summit? God bless you all. Yayabo Huma. What is that? I'm sorry. Yayabo Buma. That is Taino, for may the Creator be with us all.
Ashe. Now we got to ask y'all the last question, though. We got to ask you the ritual question.
Fair enough.
This is to each of you, and I'm dying to hear these answers, right? All right. In the land of hip hop, who you rocking with right now to get you flowing? Chris, you're the youngest. You go first.
Happy to go first. I've been listening to this a mixtape from 2010 by Wale called More About Nothing. It was one of my favorite mixtapes back in the day. Very formative experience, and I think he just put it on streaming recently. So I've just been listening to it a lot over the last few days, and it's been doing a lot for me.
All right, Chris.
I mean, Most Def for inspiration. He incorporates a lot of things about political prisoners into his songs, and also Rebel Diaz, hip hop group from Chile, that has preserved the revolutionary roots of hip hop and its use as revolutionary culture against this system, against imperialism.
You're good friends
All right.
with us in New York too. But our ICC friends also. Cuqui, what you rocking, Madam DJ? Madam Sweet Fun?
I am a 90s girl, the creation of hip hop, 80s and 90s. I'm always going to rock with Nas and AZ and KRS. Right now, the Cypher out of Jersey City. I don't know. We slept on that one. There's a kid in New Brunswick. His name is Silent Night, Jay Silent Night, and J. Cole. And those are my people. Tupac.
All right.
That's it.
And again, people just don't recognize that you're actually a DJ. You're immersed in music, still are immersed in music. And like we are definitely gonna have to get you onto our hip hop segment of our show just to talk about music.
Right.
We're just gonna talk about music. We're just gonna hold. We're not just talking about music. We're just gonna be talking about music.
Bust
Right?
that wide.
So thank you.
And we've been telling her that for the last couple of years. So we
Right. So we have to do that. We'll have to make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll make it. This will happen within the next month or so. Right.
Oh my God.
It's gonna happen in the next month or so. We're gonna bring you back. We're gonna bring you back.
I love y'all.
All right.
I love y'all.
So-
from the heart.
Thank you. Take care.
Right.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. You
All
don't
right,
stop.
Good night, everyone.
All right, y'all.
All right. So that's another segment of All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. We have Reverend Conrad Tillard, formerly known as the hip hop minister, who is on right now, and we're always on for a good time. I always like, hey, Conrad, I always like having conversations with you. Like, we may disagree on a lot of stuff, but I think that your perspective is always very important because it's got, stuff's got to be said. We got a big community, and if we can't have unity in our community based on some conversations, not based on us concluding together, but based on us being able to talk to one another, then we got to do that. We got to do that.
And let's face it, I hear brothers in the barbershop having more passionate conversations than we have over who's the greatest, LeBron or Michael Jordan. And one of the things we have to realize is that the African-American community is not a monolith. And one of the things that shows that you have grown politically is when people have different points of views, different ideas. We can have these conversations. We can agree to disagree. We're brothers. We will not always agree. And, one of the problems that I find in our analysis is that there's too much pressure to conform to a way of thinking. And I have just had too much education, too many teachers, too many personal experiences, tried too many things, been in too many movements to be uncritical in my examination of anything anyone said. I've sat with the giants, Jesse Jackson, Louis Farrakhan, Calvin Butts, James Cone. I mean, you name it, Kwame Ture. So I have been around critical thinkers. So people will just have to pardon me, because when I sit and I talk to people, I just am going to, be my authentic self. So I hope everyone in Newark understands that.
and I'm just going to throw it out to you. What is the thing you want to talk about most? And if you don't have a subject, I'm going to throw some red meat out there to get us started. So what are you thinking about right now politically?
It's been a hectic week for me. And so whatever you have in mind, and also let me remind Brother Zaid, I used to go toe to toe with Khalid Muhammad in the office every day. So
I met him rumbling with his ass too.
You have to understand from whence I've come, okay?
I'm just saying, man. Like, so You were somebody who organized with Khalid Muhammad. You
Oh
were
yeah,
someone
yeah,
who was down with the Nation of Islam. You were someone who's called the hip
absolutely.
hop minister, right? Like you have all this in your background. So I'm gonna throw it out here. I'm gonna get it started.
Sharpton,
It's
I
gonna be
mean,
fun. I'm gonna
you
throw it
know,
out there, right? So
exactly.
wait, hold on, wait. I'm winding it up, right? Now I'm throwing it out there.
Throw the fish in
You
the
think
sea. What's the sea was
so
that?
wait, hold up. So I gave you all this background. You
Uh-huh.
have a radical nationalist, I love black people background.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like I don't think no one can deny your past. No one can deny what you've done. No one can deny the movement you've been a part of, right? So I'm asking this as a question.
Sure.
Do you think, given the things that Ron DeSantis has said about critical race theory, about not wanting the AP curriculum, about this whole teach history, do you think that, and he's probably going to run for the presidency, he has a good chance, right? If he can navigate Trump, Trump gets arrested, he has a good chance of getting that nomination. Do you think, based on what he has said, he could be, based on what he said, based on what he's done, that he's someone who, like, black people should seriously consider
Well,
voting?
I don't know enough about DeSantis to give a ringing endorsement, but I think black people should look at every candidate that has the potential of being the president. And I think black people should be engaged in conversation with any candidate that is subject to sit in the White House. One of the things I admire about Jewish people is that it doesn't matter who's elected, who's in the governor's mansion, who's in the White House. They understand they have to do business with them, and they go and meet with that person and they present their agenda to him. So, it's too early to say whether or not he will even get in the race. He's not formally declared. Then he's got to get through the primary and whatever challenges that come up, and we don't know. Trump, of course, we think he's going to be formidable in the Republican primary, but we don't know. But I would say this, that, as I said on the show last week, I think he's right on this issue. I think it's a common sense, because let me also disabuse you of a notion. Can I see you all? I love seeing Jonathan, I want to see when you are making faces at my points, okay?
Oh no,
I watch you when I get off.
All right, so sometimes, right? But no one else can see.
I want to see when you do like this, okay? I want to see what he does.
I'm on camera.
I
can't
do this.
I
might come back on you a little bit, but
let me just say this.
You were just. You were trying to be real reasonable. All you said right now
was, I think
you should just look at everybody.
And let me disabuse you of one other notion. I have never considered myself radical. I don't think it's a radical proposition to tell black people to love themselves, do for self, come together, build our own institutions, build our strong families. I don't see that as a radical proposition. I've never portrayed myself as a radical. Never advanced myself as a radical. What I want, I don't think is very radical.
That's fair, but I was just giving you pro-black bona fides, right? Sure. Because when anyone says Nation of Islam, they don't think, they don't think vanilla, right? Like, when you say Khalid Muhammad, you're not thinking.
That's because
I understand what you're saying. And I'm just doing that.
Mr. Muhammad, first of all, I come from a black community that is black people are conservative. Black people, I grew up with people who taught me ethics, taught me faith, taught me self-respect, respect the community, and take pride in yourself. So whether you call it radical, conservative, I don't know. But I know one thing. When I was 19 years old, when I joined the nation, I was told not to smoke, not to drink. I got married at 23 years old, build a family, work hard in the community to build an institution and build institutions and build. So I don't know if that's radical. And I don't put my bona fides up against the likes of some that might say that. But let me just say this. I believe that DeSantis, as I said, is right on this issue. And I also believe that he is a political force that many black people will listen to. And they will say, this guy is not all bad. So yes, that's a long answer to your question. I think he's someone that black people will look at.
All right. So, and by the way, just so that you know, the reason why we always put the person on the camera is just if someone is actually watching, it's just usually easier to see one big face.
I just want to make sure you're not doing this.
But I'm not doing this. I'm not. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. Right. I actually enjoy our conversations, especially when we look at things in the opposite way. How do you learn how? Many people don't know I'm a debate coach. I coach debate. I have to look at different sides of an issue.
Absolutely.
Understanding the other side of the issue makes my side of the issue stronger. I make better arguments when I'm talking to people who are on the other side of whatever issue it is. So, so no, you are not. We may have vehemently disagreed. We often vehemently disagree, but I always enjoy the conversation. So I mean, it is what it is. And not everyone's like that, right? Not everyone's like that, but it is what it is, right? So when we shoot to you, trust Zaid is the one you need to watch, right? Zaid is the one who's gonna give you these looks, right? You go, right? That's Zaid does that. That's not me. That's not me. I'm just letting you know. We get.
I guess
I listen to everybody. Then I'll bite your ass.
We always talk about operational unity, and let's face it, the Panthers did not agree with. They were inspired by Malcolm, but they never would have been able to work with Malcolm. Huey and Bobby, and certainly Eldridge, Malcolm would have given them the blues. So I mean, we talk about operational unity. Stokely and Jesse admired Mr. Muhammad, but they weren't his followers. They had a different perspective, and he had a different perspective. And so the church or Klieg or Dr. King, we have different perspectives, and that's okay. But operational unity is what we have to be about. I'm a Black Studies teacher in the Black Studies department at City College. I'm a Black pastor that studied Black liberation theology from James Cone. All my life, I've been teaching Black people. I majored in Black studies when most Negroes in college would say, "What you gonna do with that?" And so I have a great wealth and love for the teaching of Black history and Black culture. So, it stands to reason that if I say I'm against something, it can't be because I'm uninformed, or I'm Uncle Tom, or I'm not. I just don't get it. So what I challenge people to do is understand what I'm saying, and it's very simple. That critical studies, as I said before, is not Black studies. And I'm sorry, love the grandson of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Khalil Muhammad, but these Yes.
I'm not cutting you off, right? I just want to give a context because you're jumping in beforehand because people don't know necessarily what you're agreeing with right now. Okay. So what is it about what Ron DeSantis said? Like, what did he say, and what do you actually agree with?
He simply said, listen, he said, teaching Black studies is mandated in Florida schools. I am not against teaching Black studies, but certain theories we're not going to teach. We're not going to allow for critical studies, critical race theory to be instituted in the Florida schools, because that's not Black history or Black studies. These are sort of, I call them academic junk science, because they're unproven theories. And they are fine as theories, and that's okay if they're taught as a theory. But if you roll out the theory of critical race theory or the theory of queer studies, which I don't see that has anything to do with Black studies, because that's two different disciplines, then you have to treat them like any other academic discipline. And that is to say, if you have a theory, I have the right to critically examine that theory and present an alternative theory. And that's not what's happening. DEI experts, and I love the concept of DEI. It's important, diversity, equity, and inclusion experts. But what I have a problem with is the indoctrination or the one-way presentations. I wouldn't want anyone, no one can tell me I'm a racist. No one can tell me that because I'm a man, I need to be in one group and I enjoy privilege. And what if you really analyze what's going on with the critical race theory argument, it's not about the Black studies is not what's in dispute. The dates, the facts, the history of Black people is not what's being disputed. What's being disputed is these sessions where children in kindergarten are separated by race, by gender, separated and told that one is a privileged group and they have to understand their privilege. And if they don't understand their privilege, they're racist. And the stories are rife with them. I sent you stories. I sent you stories of that. I sent you stories of other forms of indoctrination. And so it pains me that our Black studies elites, and like I love Khalil Muhammad, okay? He's spoken at my church, but he's wrong on this. He's absolutely wrong on this. And you notice this stuff comes from the elite circles. And I just hate that the Black studies movement is being hijacked and used by these critical race theorists. When I told you last week, the greatest historians we ever had never heard of critical race theory. W.E.B. Du Bois, Carter G. Woodson didn't even know what it was. So if they could teach Black studies, Arturo Schomburg, the great biblicist and great teacher of Black studies, if they can teach Black studies and they never even heard of critical race theory, why does that have to be tagged on to Black studies today? Now, I got to get the cord because my computer's going out. Give me 1 second. As I'm listening to your response, but I need to get a cord.
All right. So, yeah, like, here's the thing, right? Like, I just think that if you're talking about certain things on an extreme, like separating kindergartners and telling them certain things that that are actually theories, right? Like in terms of, because I was in West Virginia recently, right? Mm-hmm. And when I was coming back from West Virginia, even in my stay in West Virginia, one thing that I realized is that, you know, a lot of that history of that state, mm-hmm. there's nobody who kills poor white people like rich white people, mm-hmm. right? And if you look at poor white people who are dying of like lung disease, they get exploited, mm-hmm. they get like, when even in terms of just the way we look at poor white people, mm-hmm. if you say poor white person, mm-hmm. someone will think stupid, right? Mm-hmm. Like I was having conversations with this, like West Virginia, there's backwards, right? Like I think that actually, right, like a lot of critical theory, right, is like rooted in their actual history. Because when I say nobody kills poor white people like rich white people, that's literally mm-hmm. theory. That's like an interpretation of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like you have to interpret things along a particular line, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that could be instructive, right? Like I think that these are rich in debates. I think that I teach debate, right? Mm-hmm. So part of teaching debate is even in teaching different theories, mm-hmm. because there's history and there's the way we look mm-hmm. at history, mm-hmm. right? There's sociology, and sociology is rooted in looking at things in race, class, mm-hmm. gender, mm-hmm. right? And I think that there's an assumption of a neutral lens that's just not true, right? Like, I mean, I think it's great when we have these conversations and it's like, mm-hmm. yes, you disagree with these theories that are being taught, fine, that's cool, right? Like you disagree with it and push back, right? You don't think this should be taught in the curriculum, yeah, that's fine, debate it back and forth. But I think that we shouldn't pretend that any of this stuff is neutral, right? We shouldn't pretend that like whenever we're studying history that it is just objective, right? Because ultimately, all of these, like we cannot look at a discipline, whether it's a humanities discipline, right? We can't mm-hmm. look at English. We can't look at any of the authors that we read, that we include inside of the curriculum, who we say are great, right? We can't look at the way we look at history without, right, mm-hmm. an ideological component that is rooted in that. Like you study history and you know that there are different mm-hmm. schools of history. You know that there are different people who try to redesign history, right. like the Confederacy, all the other stuff when right. they were doing. And right. so I just don't think, I think that there's an assumption that of DeSantis and the people who are coming there, that there's objective history there's objective English, and then there's this nonsense that people on the side, right? I think people all have to own what it is that they're actually wanting to put in the curriculum.
Well, let me put it like this. You know, as a teacher, I have certain biases. I have certain ideas about life. I pride myself on teaching my students a wide range of ideas, so that I'm not, I learned a long time ago, there's a difference between preaching and teaching. When you're teaching, you're explaining something. When you are preaching, you're proclaiming something. And so if I teach my class about the Black Panther Party, if I teach my class about the Nation of Islam, if I teach my class about the Civil Rights Movement, I can't teach them the Civil Rights Movement uncritically. I can't teach them about this noble movement with all of these perfect individuals, all of these great figures that without spot and blemish. I have to teach them objectively. For example, James Cone was my teacher at seminary, and he's the father, at least in one sense, at least in the academy, of liberation theology. But when we took his class, he wouldn't even teach us Black theology until he made us study all of the European theologians. He said the reason why we had to study them, and the reason why we studied them before we got to Black theology, is that number one, we had to have the background. Number two, we had to have a broad perspective. And number three, you can't even understand Black theology unless you understand that Black theology is critically examining the theology that was taught prior, when Black people's perspective was not considered. So all I'm really saying is, when we teach, if we teach any theory, the students have to have the perspective that, number one, this is a theory, and number two, this is what people that oppose this theory say. Okay, but if you do that, I have no problem with it.
Right, but I think that
indoctrination aspect. In other words, when you tell Black students or boys, when you tell boys, if you're a boy, you are in a privileged class, therefore you are an oppressive hierarchy. I reject that, because you can say that's a feminist theory, but you have to be able to tell the students that's not the only way to examine that issue.
I think that here's the thing, right? I think that you're creating a straw man, right? Like, and by straw man, I don't mean that. Okay, I listen to you.
All right, sure.
I don't think that the examples that you talk about don't exist, right? Clearly they do, right? Where people, well, in debate, we say that there are kids who make really bad arguments, but those bad arguments don't mean that the discipline shouldn't be taught. I think the difference between what you're saying and what DeSantis is doing, what I find the reason why many people in Board of Educations are attacked or get these death threats, right? The reason why this is going on is because not that they don't want a plethora of theories to taught. Like, I don't agree with Black feminist theory, right? A lot of it, right? I teach it. I've taught it, right? I don't agree with a lot of intersectionality. I teach it because I teach debate. I teach to debate it, right? Mm-hmm. Debate it, good, bad, that kind of stuff. But the attack right now is the theory shouldn't be taught. They're literally saying that because when we're talking about AP curriculum, we're talking about high school students. They don't want to know history. We're not talking, right, and we're talking about high school students. We're not talking about little kids, right? We're talking about what DeSantis said about history and teaching. They're talking about high school. They're talking about high school curriculum. We're not talking about little kids in kindergarten, right? So when you're talking about taking a Mary Baraka and the Black Arts Movement out, right? Like saying we can't teach that, We object because literally they're saying DeSantis objected, and that was the thing that was going on with the College Board, right? Because they were going back and forth. They were objecting to theories, right? But theories that get debated, right? That like we debate the legitimacy of the Black Arts Movement, right? Right? Like as in, but you teach there was a reason for it, right? Like so, we know that people are taught mainstream, pro-capitalist, pro-US, rah-rah versions of history. That is not in controversy. That gets taught. So when you're saying both sides, it gets taught everywhere.
I don't know. But I don't know. First of all, okay, again, I'm not, and I think, again, I've made it clear, I'm not advocating for a pro-capitalist. I don't know what you're explaining, but that's not what I teach, and that's not what I've advocated for. What I'm simply saying is, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the high school level, the college level, elementary school level. I think what people are pushing back against, and again, Jonathan, look, I've sent you these articles. You just Google these teachers that are pushing their agenda on these students. I went to a liberal seminary, progressive seminary, that was, as far as I'm concerned, it was not an intellectual institution at all. It was an indoctrination camp. I have gone to some of the great universities in the world. I know when I'm being taught, and I know when I'm being indoctrinated. And I reject that. I reject an education that rigidly indoctrinates children. And that is what, in my opinion, the governor of Florida is saying. Now, I have said from the beginning, he doesn't have any knowledge of Black studies. I don't think he's the best person to be determining what is in the curriculum or not. But what I will say is that the progressive left has politicized this debate. They have politicized this. And as I've said to you before, we know we're talking about high school students, even though it's AP classes. You are not going to be able to teach in high school AP all the things that you might want to teach. Okay, it's just no room for it. You know that it's a limited exposure. Okay, for students. Okay, how many classes are they going to take about Black studies? One AP studies, one AP unit on Black studies. I mean, you know that you're not going, there are people who spend 12 and 14 years studying and getting a PhD to understand Black studies. So you're not going to be able to get in an AP course everything from soup to nuts. So my question is, why do these elite scholars prioritize the stuff that they're putting in? They could be teaching about Dred Scott. We got enough just from 1619 to the Civil War that would cover everything you need to know about. You couldn't even scratch the surface just on that. So you can't teach in one high school semester or even a year the expanse of Black studies. You have to go
but I think we can agree.
Upper level classes in college, you get some of the fine points of it, some of these arguments and so forth.
But I think we can agree that the governor of Florida shouldn't be the one that determines what Black studies is.
And I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that. And
because that's really the debate, right? Like for me, that's the debate. He's like, AP, you're not going to be allowed in Florida because even though there are a lot of like mainstream, like the people putting together the AP curriculum are mainstream scholars, right? Like you have Henry Louis Gates, you have the person who you were a student of, right? Like
Gates was brought in later.
Right, but I mean, his name was like certified, and even the person that you talked about, I forget the name, but someone you thought very much respected. Right, very, very well respected people, right? And the things that they wanted to try to push out, right? Like I'm sorry, like the Black Arts Movement is pretty important. Like
okay, but you keep focusing on that, but
but I'm saying that as an example of what the governor of Florida wanted to exclude.
And I think that's wrong, but do you admit that queer theory should not be shoehorned into schools in the context of Black studies? I mean, because these
Actually,
are two different disciplines.
Wait, hold it. Wait,
These are two different disciplines. And I'm not saying that there's no place for queer studies, but do you acknowledge that, hey, or do you acknowledge that if you're going to teach about Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, who was a socialist, who was also a Pan-Africanist, if you're going to teach about some of the progressive movements, there should be units in the curriculum that talk about Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, talk about Booker T. Washington, so that students are given a broad perspective of African-American thought. See, if you will agree to that, I will agree with you. But my point is balance the curriculum at every level so that the students have a broad perspective. Don't design a curriculum that has a left-wing bent or right-wing bent, but an objective, comprehensive curriculum.
I think that I think that here's where I think we disagree. I don't think there's anything, I don't think you're ever being objective, but you can be fair, right? I think that if you take a history course or an African American history course, and again, I'm using the controversies of the governor of Florida, and the reason why I keep bringing up Amiri Baraka is because that was explicitly excluded based on those conversations. So we're talking about the notion of these things. So to answer your question specifically about queer theory, right? I think that it has a place, right? Because as a debate coach, I'm a debate coach. We teach about race, class. We debate about these things. We debate about queer theory. We debate about queer theory, right? There's an entire rich history of literature that is written by Black queer people about what's going on, right? Like a lot of it's based on like ways of looking at gender, right? Like you have African scholars who are looking at how gender as a binary is a construct of European thinking, right? Like, and those are valuable thoughts that come back, right? And again, yes, you're right, they're theories, right? That's part of
that's all I'm saying. These are theories. These are theories.
But I think that, but those are.
And if you present a theory, you should present an alternate theory or a critical examination of that theory.
When you have debate, that's what we're supposed to teach people how to debate about all of these things. And most African American studies courses, like most English courses, like most history courses, we teach people to make argument. Like about good pedagogy, you teach people how to debate about history. You teach people to debate about English, and that's every English class should be doing that, right? But I think that when you bring up certain subjects, you're shut down. Teachers are getting fired because of things that they bring in to the classroom.
Give me an example
that teaches
of that.
people to
give me an example of that.
We was changing articles back and forth, but in terms of just like a teacher who felt harassed out of the classroom because of teaching, right? Because of what she was teaching in terms of bringing things into the classroom. I don't have those exact examples right now. I can go.
And I don't get into feelings
again, this isn't feelings, right? But this isn't.
You tell me somebody got fired because they brought something objective into the classroom.
But here's where we disagree. What is like when you're saying objective, right? If you're teaching debates about both sides, then you can't have it both ways. You can't teach broadly and then say objective. You're teaching that they're different sides.
I agree.
So if you're teaching about intersectionality, which the governor of Florida says should not be taught, right?
No, he just said what does that have to do with Black studies? And I agree with that. I mean, that's a legal theory. That is not. That's only marginally Black studies. I mean, no.
I think that's a debate. I think we can debate about that.
Okay, but
I think it's a lens. I don't even agree with intersectionality, but I teach it.
You're a debate coach. When I'm teaching a history class, a history of the civil rights movement, I'm teaching a history of the Black nationalist movement. I'm teaching
African studies is not just African history, though. I think here's where we disagree too, right? African American studies is interdisciplinary.
It is. Right?
So it's not. So when you're talking about history, no, it is interdisciplinary. That means it's literature, it's psychology, right? So African American studies is the history of our people is the history.
It is, but why? But let me ask you a question. If I say to you, Carter G. Woodson, the father of the Black history, W.B. Du Bois, the father of the intellectual tradition.
And sociology.
John Hope Franklin. If I say they didn't teach critical studies, and out of all of the history of Black people, why are we so obsessed with teaching things that weren't even theories 30 years ago? This is the newest, most interesting toy for a lot of these elite scholars. This is not the core of Black studies. Why are we so obsessed
Books that have been banned.
Let me
shoehorning these things into this debate?
If we're talking about specifics, right? Like, and just let me say this.
But why
and
though?
jump in. No, but I think that this is also a misunderstanding because when Toni Morrison shows up on multiple banned books lists, very specifically by many of the people who are saying, hey, we don't want critical studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say we don't like critical studies, and they target Toni Morrison,
Mm-hmm.
or they target James Baldwin, right? Like we're talking about I bring up Westfield, New Jersey all the time because they use the word critical studies,
Mm-hmm.
but then they talk about Toni Morrison, James Baldwin, right? So it seems like there's a disconnect even between the way you're looking at critical studies. Because the reason why I'm saying this is because
I don't.
Wait, one last thing. The
Sure,
reason
sure.
I teach critical studies,
Mhm.
most history, English, even African American studies classes would not teach critical studies. In an African American studies, not history, but studies course,
Mhm.
these are like debates. And when you're dealing with debates that have taken place over I think the history of studying Black people is the history of us studying our struggle, and our struggle is rooted in debates. Whether it's the debates, and a lot of those are cover like topics that many people who are, and I'm using this as an example, and you're right, I'm going to use this as an example, the Westfield parents who talk about critical studies also don't like. I'm going to let Zaid jump in.
I just
and
think
then back to
lastly
you.
on that point, the Westfield example to me is no different than the Ocean Hill Brownsville 1967 case. You're always going to have parents at the local level wanting to have a say about what their children are learning. And that to me is entirely appropriate, as I want to always have a say. I want to know the curriculum. I want to have input, whether that means being a part of the PTA, as I've been a 2-time PTA president. I'm on the board at my son's school. I want to have or whether it means running for the school board or attending school board meetings. So I don't see people who a local community as being, that's not sinister as far as I'm concerned, for them wanting to have an input into what their children are learning. Now, but it's true, our communities are very different. So, what one community wants and what one community wants is going to be different. That's why when you argue for state standards, you got to find something that really is palatable to a wide segment of the citizens.
But I use them to say that when they say critical race studies, they mean Toni Morrison, right?
Well,
which is not what you mean. I'm just saying that when they're in a popular culture, right? Like right now, when critical race studies is being vilified, you have an actual definition of what critical studies is. Many of the people who are arguing against it are thinking James Baldwin and Toni Morrison. That's different. So I'm just saying you should acknowledge the difference between the way in which you're using
all politics is local. I mean, let's face it. I mean, there are communities, there are Orthodox Jewish communities in this city. They're not learning about Toni Morrison. They're not even learning about George Washington. These people are teaching their children what is important to them. And there are Black people who have Black schools that are prioritizing Malcolm, prioritizing things that are important to them. That's the democracy of our.
But the critical race studies thing isn't local; it becomes national, right? So I'm just saying that the way that DeSantis is using it is different. Like nationally, is different. Zaid and then Donna, because I know Zaid has been trying to jump in. Donna,
I'm sorry,
and then back
Zaid.
to
Go right ahead, brother.
Zaid, are you around? Are you back? All right. Well, Donna, and then Zaid when he comes back.
No, just to Reverend Conrad's point about all politics are local, I'm not sure currently if it's still the same, but I can remember probably like 10 to 12 years ago in the city of Maplewood. they had policy that, and maybe Zaid knew about this in the city of Maplewood, that over the holidays, and when I speak of the holidays in December, that any school productions that they could not sing any songs that mentioned the name that said Christmas or Jesus at one point. So, and I
Right.
don't know if it's changed back, but I know
Right.
that, and that was local policy. So that was like, and
Absolutely. And there are many people in that are religious, a lot of Christian people upset that you can't say Merry Christmas, that there are no manger scenes in public buildings. But all politics is local. If you have a critical mass in that local community that don't want that and they vote on that, then that is the will of the people in that community. So it cuts,
The
it
only
cuts
the only
both ways. It
the only
really cuts
pushback
both ways.
the only pushback on that is that the cause against critical race theory is national because it's national talk shows, right? Fox News, the other conservative outlets have been vilifying, quote, critical race theory. And the Toni Morrison is not just being banned in Westfield, right? Like this is a popular call. So when I'm saying that, like,
Religion has been banned, and this debate with religion has gone on nationally for much longer.
right, but I'm just saying when you're saying all politics are local, I'm saying this critical race theory thing is actually a conservative national movement that I do believe defines critical race theory different than you do,
I don't
Reverend
know that
Conrad.
I don't really think it's a conservative movement. I mean, I think there are a lot of people in the African American community that feel the same way. I mean, we just make these assumptions that black folks are left leaning and that they agree with all this stuff. And there are a lot of black people that do not agree with this. I mean,
Right, but even
I'm not speaking in a vacuum. So, I mean, I talk to people every day. I talked to Dr. Leonard Jeffries about this issue, and he absolutely agreed with me that, in
but
fact, the difference between Black studies, Black history, Nile Valley civilization, all the things that they taught, and this new phenomenon in academia called critical race theory is as different as East is from West. And I'm saying to you, as I said from the beginning, if these venerable historians never had critical race theory in their toolbox and they illuminated our minds with Black history, why is it critical today? In my view, it's not. It's just that's where the money is, because that's what the elite white folks and the elite Negroes that teach at elite universities want. It's a privileged political agenda right now in this country. And I am, thank God, there's some regular folks, whether they're at Walmart or the dollar store on South Orange Avenue or the Walmart down in Georgia. Thank God some regular folks are pushing back on this stuff. And I'm a regular folk.
Well, I don't. Well, Zaid, you wanted to jump in before.
You better call Zaid. You better call the Army, Navy, and Air Force and Marine.
No. Zaid wanted to speak. I can go on. You know me. I can go on, right? I can push back, but I'm letting Zaid. You have
remember
something
those
to say?
old wrestling matches when you.
I'll just say this. I mean, this is kind of rest time. I don't have a problem with all of that. My thing is this: we're looking at this attack on Black studies, critical. All of that is a critical study. Critical race theory is being used as a rouge to cover anything Black, right? As a part of a conservative movement that DeSantis embodies, that is not a regular conservative movement. Conservative meant something different 40, 50 years ago, right? 40, 50 years ago, a Huey P. Newton and a Malcolm X can have a conversation on a television show with a William Buckley. Nobody got killed, nobody went to jail, nobody lost their lives, nobody lost their position. It ain't like that no more. We had a bunch of crazy ass white folks. I'm making it plain, right? They didn't jump on us first. They jumped on the capital of the United States.
Well, I was just about to say they didn't bother us.
You had your time. Hold up now, guys.
Okay.
Right?
All
Trying
right.
to overthrow an election, right? And we're seeing this attack on Black studies coming from the DeSantises of the land as a part of that same motion towards the de-democratizing of the country. as a dangerous right-wing movement that is willing to go to fascism in order to preserve its privilege, right? And that's why we say it's dangerous. So now you got another take on that? You go ahead and dance with that. But I am not letting you go down against none of these crazy behind folks.
I do. I don't easily use the word fascist. There's an old saying that the Marxist-Leninists, one of the tactics of Marxist-Leninism is to label people fascist, anti-Semitic, dangerous, landowners. I don't throw around. I know what fascism really is. Benito Mussolini was a fascist. There are many fascists in history. We don't have fascism in the United States. We have sometimes vigorous political debate. We have people who believe
people
very
trying
differently.
to take our right to vote.
We don't have fascism.
People taking women's right to choose.
What?
People coming.
That's not fascism.
Hold on, wait.
That's our lives and our blood. That ain't fascist. I'm saying it's racist and fascist. America
hold it,
Supreme Court made a decision that said local communities will decide that.
I'm going to ask a question to you.
Sure.
Right, Conrad, I'm going to ask a question to you.
Sure.
What is fascism? What does it look like?
So you're familiar with Mussolini, right? Benito Mussolini was the fascist dictator in Italy. All of the power of the state was in the hands of the sovereign of the state. We do not have that kind of political reality in America. And I know we use hyperbolic language in politics. Both sides do it. But the fact of the matter is we don't have fascism in the United States. So we can't say that, when the Supreme Court decides that Roe versus Wade is bad law and they overturn it, that's not fascism. That's the justices made a ruling that we may not like, but it essentially kicked the issue of abortion back to the states and said the states have the right. The people in those states have the right to elect officials to make that decision. That's not fascism.
So you're saying that the reason why it's not fascism is
because it's just not fascism. It's still a part of the democratic process.
Because it's just because in blue states, abortion is not banned at all. In red states, where the majority of people in those states don't want abortion, that's where, it has to be the majority of people in those states.
Well, if that's democracy, that's not fascism.
Right?
And if the people voted on that, that's not fascism.
And
whether you like it or not, I might not like it, or you might not like it. But if the people are part of the process,
I'm just clarifying this because I'm gonna say Zaid. Because what he's saying is, if in Georgia or Florida, the majority of DeSantis won with an immense amount of the vote. He won with over 20 points higher. In Texas, the governor won the election. They won as pro-life conservatives. If it's kicked back to them, if the majority of people in those states, including the majority of white women, right? In other words, pro-abortion states can't happen without the consent of the majority of white women in those states. Why is that fascist? And Zaid.
That's all I'm saying. Right.
But Zaid, your response. Zaid, you're muted. Zaid, you're muted.
Yeah, these elections are taking place in context with people's rights and access to the ballot has been severely limited by folks who are winning those majorities. And sometimes those majorities are tainted, and there's been real struggle around trying to preserve and protect our respective rights to vote in all of those communities that you just named.
But if
we were in a situation where the right to vote was secure, that's a different conversation.
But isn't that only
the right to vote is not secure?
But in red states, most red states go 70, 60, 70, 80% Republican, right? Aren't you talking about Texas and
John and Reverend Conrad, we're gonna have to do to be continued.
We do.
Because our
absolutely because we're over time
here, and I don't know if I missed the next segment. Top.
This is Reverend
Conrad, but I know Reverend Conrad.
Death of Harriet.
And Reverend Conrad, your brother. But yeah, guess it back. But Reverend Conrad, your brother's down in Mississippi.
No. I have a brother in Georgia, not in Mississippi.
Oh, okay. All
My,
right. So next one, I thought we were going to talk. I
my
wanted to talk
roots are
to you
in
about
Mississippi.
Jackson. We got. That's
No.
why we want to talk. Okay.
Yeah. My people are from Mississippi, but that
Oh,
no.
But
yeah.
No,
So I
Donna,
thank
were
you
you,
all.
Donna, were you telling us we had time and then starting to start another subject? Was
I
that what you
said,
going on
I
just now?
said next segment, Reverend
You usually do it with
Conrad,
a
we're
question.
going to talk about Jackson. That's what I
Okay.
said.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Okay, Reverend
So,
Conrad.
Well,
so
I thank
Conrad.
you all, and God bless you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope you will at least weigh what I have to say, and we continue these conversations, and
Right.
I enjoy them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, and we'll talk to you next month.
You got
We'll
invited.
see you
Well,
next
come
month.
and sit in the back of your classroom one day.
Anytime.
Okay. All right.
Anytime. All right. Have a good one. All
All
right.
right. Take care. All right. So, hello. We have a wonderful segment right now and we have. I'm gonna introduce one person. Zaid can introduce the other amazing people that we have as a guest. Harriet Tubman is the subject of the next half hour, and
Introducing Harriet Tubman. Okay.
no, is the subject
Okay.
of the next half hour. And this wonderful writer, who's my sister,
Yes.
Annette Alston, did an amazing book on Harriet Tubman for beginners, right? That came out right around the time of the movie to give people an understanding of who Harriet Tubman really was. And I had the honor of going to the Smithsonian to her book signing at the Smithsonian for African American history. So that is Annette Alston, and Zaid, please
Sound like
introduce
a proud big brother
our
there. Go
other.
ahead.
Absolutely. And no. I mean, I introduced my sister. I introduced my
I
sister.
thought that's what you wanted me to do.
No, I wanted to introduce my sister. And the two wonderful guests that we have on, who are the great grandnieces of Harriet Tubman, who died only, and I just realized this at the beginning of the show,
Yeah, that's
only
important.
110 years ago, right? Like,
Yes.
that's, yeah.
Oh, I don't know who you're talking to. Yes. Oh.
Well, let's. Well, I think they should introduce themselves, right?
Okay.
Because we're talking about lineage that is several generations long, and I'm very honored to meet you. We got we're a collective that sometimes gets our scripts crossed. Sister
Absolutely.
Michele and Sister Adrianne, but we're all family here. We have a good time, right? But I'm going to introduce a segment this way. Right? As I will close the last segment, Harriet Tubman was one of the greatest human beings to walk the face of this earth. Right? She was a military genius. And on this day, I posted her gun and her sword. That she had both. It's a matter of record on my page to honor her valor, her incredible valor, and her military genius and prowess that made her the champion of justice that she absolutely was. We're honored to have two of her relatives, one who also authored a book, right? And I know the question I wanted to ask first, Beyond the Underground, Aunt Harriet knows this of her people. Now, can't everybody say that Harriet Tubman is their auntie? But Michele Jones Galvin can, right? And I need y'all to explain your relationship to each other. She auntie to both of y'all, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I think we probably should start there. Tell us your how y'all are related to this incredible ancestor who was so huge to so many of us all over the world, but particularly the African descendants here in these United States.
Wonderful. Thank you for having us. My name is Michele
Jones Galvin, and I am a great grandniece
of Harriet Tubman. We know that our 3 times great grandmother, Sophia Ross, was Harriet Tubman's sister. And as most of you know, Harriet Tubman herself
did not have biological children. So all of us that are related to her are related through one of her siblings, and we are related through her sibling, Sophia. Just a little bit of background about how we came about the book Beyond the Underground. Aunt Harriet, Moses of Her People, really began with my mother's journey to find her biological relationship to Harriet Tubman. And it was a journey that took well over 25 years. She was a professional person in the workplace. She was mother. She was researcher.
Michelle, one
Yes.
second. Just one second. Jonathan, what? Because I can hear the echo in the back. Is that because you have, what
Hey,
did
you have
you,
to turn
do
your
you,
mic off.
a radio? Or yeah, that's somebody else has a mic on. Okay,
Um,
it did. And Jonathan, you're muted. I can't hear you, Jonathan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, now, yes.
Whenever you don't have your mic on, make sure, like, whenever you're not talking, make sure you mute yourself. Right now, there's, I think with
honey, turn
Michele,
around.
I think, yes, there's something going on in the background, because whenever I mute you, the background noise isn't heard. So make sure that in your background, that there's nothing, that there are no other links that are open, because that's why we're getting an echo. Also, when you're not speaking, just make sure you put yourself on mute.
Now, maybe is it because Adrianne and I are in the same car?
Yes, absolutely. Like you're actually bouncing off of each other. Only one of your mics should be on. Or actually, if you're in the same car, maybe share your phone.
What's the best way for us to handle that then? Because what happened is we've traveled back to Syracuse this evening, and we are just basically getting in, and the only way we could tune in was from the car. So
Well,
we're
no,
both in the
but
car, and maybe that's...
But you have two different phones out. Are two different phones working?
Yes.
Okay, just speak from one phone.
Oh.
I think if you speak from one phone, it'll be fine.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Speak from one phone. You're getting an echo back and forth because you're in the
Okay,
same car.
so as we talk, when I finish, I pass the phone to Adrianne.
Perfect. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And it'll just show up as your name, but we know that.
Thank you for your technical assistance. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry. So should I start from the beginning? I will. Thank you so much. Very nice to be here this evening. Edward did a wonderful job with connecting us, and of course I screwed something up. But anywho, let me just start with my introduction. My name is Michele Jones Galvin. I am a great, great, great grandniece of Harriet Tubman. And we are related to her through our 3 times great grandmother, Sophia Ross, who was Harriet's sister. And as most of you know, Aunt Harriet did not have biological children of her own. So anybody that you come across that says that they're related are related through one of her siblings. Yeah. We are all generational nieces. But as I had explained to Edward earlier today, that what is so magnificent about finding out our biological tie to Aunt Harriet is the fact that we are actually biological grandchildren of her parents, Ben and Rit Ross. We also know of Harriet's grandmother, Modesty, so we are also grandchildren of Aunt Harriet's grandmother, Modesty. So we are so honored to be here on the show today, but I want to just start with the journey as it happened. This all came about beyond the underground, Aunt Harriet, Moses of Her People, because our mother, Joyce Stokes Jones, knew from the time she was a young girl that she was related to Harriet Tubman, but she had a passion to find out exactly how she was related to the greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman. So she did that. This is a result of about 25 years of work My mom was a professional in the workplace. She was a mother, she was a wife, and she spent every single minute and every personal dollar on trying to find out what that relationship was. And we did. And along the way, we began to know exactly who Aunt Harriet was. She was an abolitionist, an activist, a patriot, a humanitarian, and a person who was just guided overall, just from her own words, by God. And she truly believed every mission that she went on, all of the work that she did was guided by God. So we have the book now. It's out and ready to be purchased, and I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Is Michele, is the book only available as an ebook? Because that's what
No, it's not available. It is available by ebook, but it is available in paperback. We are the distributors, and it can be purchased through mosesofherpeople.com. And when you visit us there, you will also see our website, and it'll talk about our journey. It'll talk about my mother and my travels, and it will, there's a purchase page where you can actually purchase the book from there.
Great.
And I see that Edward has up
he has a copy.
He's holding the book up. And what's so wonderful about
and that's not an ebook.
That's not an ebook. That's the actual book. That's the.
Some of us are old school. I like I want some pages. I want write my name in it and everything. I still do that kind of stuff. I used to use them for gifts. I want my children to have children's books.
That's right. And it's the tactile feel. You're churning those pages. You're going through. I think we have 31 chapters. It's loaded with It's loaded with pictures from Africa. This, that. I mean, you are hopefully going to enjoy it. We have gotten some wonderful rave reviews on it, and I'm almost sure that you'll get back to me and let me know that it's probably one of the best books you've ever read.
Well, let me say one thing and ask one basic question, and then the question can go to both of you, right? But given one is that we have to figure out Newark has a very good community-based bookstore and source of knowledge bookstore, and I have to pay them a visit about several books that we need to do some building around, and so I want to make sure that we can follow up with you and try and make sure that is properly brought into that store, and that if possible we bring it to Newark to celebrate the book in that kind of setting. All right. Now the question is this: as a consequence of so much you have learned, I'm sure, on this journey that you and your mother went on, right?
Yes.
And there is a modicum of scholarship on Harriet Tubman, and Annette, you can certainly respond to this too, right? Are you satisfied with the recent scholarship of Harriet Tubman, and where do we need to see more scholarship around Harriet Tubman?
Well, I mean, I think in general, and Mom and I have been working on this for 25 years. Most people know something about her. They may know about her rescues, but fewer know about what has happened to her through her entire life, her time in slavery, her actual escape, her work in the Civil War, the fact that she also indeed was one of the co-founders of the National Association of Colored Women, the fact that she also, toward the end of her life, was the founder of the John Brown Home for the Aged and Indigent Colored People, which was one of the first African-American nursing homes in upstate New York. There's so much. Yes, there's so much about Aunt Harriet that people don't know that they will find in the book, or at least in the book and my co-joined presentation as well. So there's a lot of room for people to be informed as well as inspired by Aunt Harriet.
The great Annette Austin is smiling. She's got a model. She's got
I am so honored actually to have an opportunity to meet with you. And I'm so proud
Ed, you
that
knocked it out of the park, brother. You got a great show.
the great, great, great grandnieces of Harriet Tubman have actually put into print information about Harriet Tubman
yeah.
as well. Because
Mhm.
this is the first time a relative of Harriet Tubman has actually
I'm so
printed
glad
a
you
book.
mentioned that. I'm
So
so glad you
that's
mentioned that.
impressive.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. We are not only the first to write, but the first to research. This book is a compilation of 25 years of research on Aunt Harriet, and I'm going to give a phone to my sister Adrianne, who has helped us in these later years to do continued research. What we find is that family history does not have an end. it's a continual process and a living process, because history is every day, and there's something always more to be learned, not only by Aunt Harriet, but you see, she comes from a family of folks, and so it's really about learning everything we can about her parents, everything we can about her siblings, everything we can about the way she lived, what she did, who her friends were. So, I mean, it is a massive, continued project and journey to get the full information, education, and inspiration of all of our family members. So, what's different about this book is that we do it with a lens of family. It's not just about Aunt Harriet, the iconic figure, but her as a woman within a family. So I'm going to give the I'm going to give the phone to my sister now, who is a researcher and continues to research on the family, and perhaps she can talk to you from that perspective.
Yeah. And that's really interesting too. I'm going to, of course, let you speak, but coming from a family perspective, of course, there are always stories in a family that may not necessarily get into the history book, and stories that are passed down and things that happened and people talk about. So I'm wondering if any of those stories made it into the book as well. Stories that you might not have heard about Harriet Tubman, as you said, the iconic figure, but the family person.
Okay, you want to take that? Okay, we're back to the book. Well, I think there are some stories. Let me see if I can come up with one in particular. It may not be about Aunt Harriet specifically, but what I want to communicate to you at this moment that's on my mind and heart is that Aunt Harriet's grandmother, Modesty, we are assuming, based on all the dots we can put together, that she came over on the Middle Passage. All of our family, including Aunt Harriet, really come out of the eastern shore of Maryland, which is the Cambridge, Bucktown area. And on that Middle Passage, we understand that the admiral of those ships had a special passage that would lead down to the female dungeon, and they would choose from that dungeon which woman would come up through that portal or through that passageway and be taken by the admiral for the evening or several evenings, and then be sent back down to the dungeon. And why that's so important, I think, for us is because we do know for a fact that Aunt Harriet's mother was the child of a white man. So the two stories converge, maybe not in reality, but converge in terms of allowing us to understand the role of miscegenation and how that works in not only Aunt Harriet's family, but in many of our families. So a lot of it is creative, historical reconstruction that allows us to learn how things worked back then. And trying to think, from the simple fact that she loved apples, for example. And we know that for a fact. Let's see some other things. I'm trying to think of things that might be of more interest. Let's come back to that, and then I'll be able to generate some of those family folklore types of things for you.
It's interesting you should mention the passage. I went to Ghana 2 years ago, and celebrated my birthday there, and I going to the slave dungeons. It's quite an experience.
Yes.
You think you're prepared for that experience because you know it's going to be difficult
You can
to
think
go
you can
through, but
prepare.
you're really not.
You cannot. You cannot.
You
I
cannot
understand
be.
exactly what you're saying, because my mother and I went to Ghana in 2007 specifically to look for information that would lead us to Aunt Harriet's grandmother, Modesty. And when we got there, after all this build up, when we got there, they said to us, well, you know, we wish we could help you, but we cannot help you because you don't know her African name. And had we known her African name, they would have been able to clearly identify exactly where she came from and what tribe. And since we did not have that information, all we had was information that told us that Aunt Harriet had reported at one point that the nannies in the slave quarter used to call her one of those Ashantis. And as an Ashanti, you know, they come from Ghana, from the Kumasi region. And that's about as far as we were able to get because we did not have Aunt Harriet's grandmother's name.
There is a statue, I understand, in Kumasi dedicated to Harriet Tubman.
Yes.
As well. You got a chance to, were you there?
Yes.
Was it up when you went there?
Yeah, we had a chance to see it. And whoever was the Nana, they call them Nanas there, the queens of that region, we met with her as well.
You know, with all of the DNA stuff that they're doing now, I just always wondered if there's a way to trace more specifically, you know, Harriet Tubman, so that you could get an idea as to who Modesty might have been, you know.
Well, we are we are working on two projects. One is a quasi ancestry project where my mother, because she is one of the eldest in our family, meaning Aunt Harriet's family that's surviving, she's given her DNA. We certainly have given our DNA. And what we're trying to do with our genealogist is to kind of create a picture of those who have taken the DNA test and how many actually are related to my mother, you know, as the matriarch of the family. So that's one project. And we are now in the process of taking a new ancestry test that is called African ancestry, where they will use that DNA to more specifically identify not only geographically where we're located, I mean where we're represented, but also the actual tribe. So it's a process, but we are involved in that at the moment.
I have to uplift the fact. Can you hear me okay? I have to uplift the fact that just yesterday, the city of Newark just unveiled a new monument to Harriet Tubman, and it takes place as an act of cultural self-determination as a consequence, I say, of the important leadership of Mayor Ras Jula Baraka, because before the monument was erected, the name of the park was changed, and a particular monument was taken down. The monument of Christopher Columbus, right, who didn't discover anything, right, and whose history is rooted in genocidal violence, right? His monument was taken down, and the park was renamed, originally named after George Washington. Although he may be the father of this country, he was also somebody who had at least 300 of our ancestors in bondage and never released one, right? The park was renamed Harriet Tubman Park, and a new monument was erected just 2 days ago. That is quite beautiful and an important act of reclaiming our history and refusing to have our history erased. So I just wanted to share the context of this conversation for where we are locally, where we're based in New Jersey. And if we ever can bring you this way, we not just want to get you in the bookstore. We want you to see this new development that this generation of leadership came forward.
They were here yesterday.
Oh, okay. All right. I didn't know.
Yeah,
all right.
They were here yesterday.
Well, you know, if everybody was on the air, didn't know, y'all, you know, you're getting it twice. You get it from Ed, you get it from me.
Trying to get everybody try.
Tell us.
Sister Galvin, has there ever been any discussion about getting with Professor Gates and in terms of him being helpful in terms of the your heritage and genealogy?
Yes. There's been some discussion with Dr. Lewis Gates, not with him specifically, but he has a project right now where they're looking for non-celebrities to apply to be on the show. And so we've made that application, but we won't be hearing that for months in terms of what the decision may or may not be on that. But we certainly would hope so. And that would be an absolutely fascinating segment if we were so chosen, and we don't know, and we're hoping like everybody else that he may choose us.
And have you had the opportunity to spend some time down in Cape May? Because I know we had the principal of Cape, I think she's a
Harriet
principal,
Tubman
but
House.
for the Harriet and all the information she has down there, so people have, like these little different pieces of information that if you can put together. But I know
Yes.
when we had the opportunity to interview her on the show and the information. So you have been down there?
I was there about 20 years ago. My husband and I decided, and this was well before we even knew there was anything about Aunt Harriet down there. We were down there about 20 years ago. And so I know the area. And when it came up, when we finally realized that Aunt Harriet was actually there, it became very informative to us that she was there and that she actually, I believe, took slaves from there or from the South to there, if I have it correct.
It was a point forward,
correctly. And then they made their lives there. So yes, I'm very aware of what she did in Cape May. But however, what I would like to do is for our family and I to make another trip there so that we can be better informed as to actually what she did, where she lived, who she took out or who she brought in, and perhaps what happened to those families after their rescue.
Well, I'd love to be in the room when you do. That's for sure.
Okay.
I hope we can have that conversation.
That's
Annette,
right.
can you tell us? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But just
Go
one more
ahead.
question. And I always like to ask the question when we see Cynthia Erivo, who portrayed her in the movie. Um, Oftentimes families can have input, but from the movie, when you saw it, how did you feel about the movie? Did they was justice done?
Well, the way I'd like to answer that is to say that it's to our family's chagrin that we were not part of even consulting on the film. We would have loved to have been able to do that. But with that said, I think our family would say that the film itself was really very good. And one of the reasons why it was very good is because Cynthia really seemed to capture the spirit of Aunt Harriet. Her rehearsals or a character, analysis, or how she got herself into Aunt Harriet's space was really absolutely phenomenal. We understand, though, that there was some controversy about different parts of the movie. And some of the research that we did was not borne out in the movie as we would have maybe wanted to see it. But overall, I would say overall, it really was an excellent movie.
So
I,
Michelle, can we get Adriana to
yes, we
give us an
can.
overall talk to
Yeah.
us about what happened yesterday and what that experience was
Yes.
like and so forth?
Hold on. Here she is.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Of course, you don't see her name up there because they're sharing a phone, but of course, this is the lovely Adriana, and she's one of the sisters. And so, why don't you talk to us about what happened yesterday and what that experience was like, particularly, what you all experienced not only in the city of Newark, but what that was like to be in the presence of the mayor and all those dignitaries, and particularly Queen Latifah.
Okay. I can relate and tell everyone that as the great 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 grandniece of Aunt Harriet, three great grandniece of Aunt Harriet, that the event yesterday of the unveiling, I mean, it was like a spiritual awakening for me, and I knew that Aunt Harriet at some point was in our presence, in our midst. Um, I appreciate it when my sister does her presentations, and I accompany her whenever I can. And just for the mere fact that Newark, New Jersey welcomed us open arms yesterday for the unveiling, it was really, really much appreciated. And
Wish I could have been
um,
there.
the mayor, his words personally just moved me. In retrospect, to speak in reference to Aunt Harriet and all the other dignitaries that were there yesterday, and also my sister. Um, Aunt Harriet is, she was a very spiritual person, she definitely loved family. And I believe through her characteristics and through her parents' characteristics have stemmed down to me. And I can actually say that just for the mere fact that family does mean a lot to me. And that's what has made me take an interest in family history. Uh, I am the second family historian. My mother was the first, and I'm hoping I'm doing her well by serving as the second historian of the family. As Michelle had stated before, I had taken on the job of the family historian from my mom, who is now retired and so forth from that. And I wanted to take it on just merely for the fact that since my mom was able to find her family roots or whatever, I said to myself, well, we never had anything on our father, Harry Jones. So I said, what I'll do, I'll just go back and start tracing, my father's roots. And that's what got me involved in that. And the only way I knew about tracing anything about family was through my mom. And I definitely give her praise and so forth of showing me the ropes of how to follow family um, history. And yesterday, just having everybody surround us and giving us love and making us feel very comfortable in Newark was a blessing.
I wish we could get tape of the mayor who, when he took this on from the beginning, and how passionate he was about seeing this project through. So I'm sure what he said came out because of what he has envisioned come to fruition. So to hear, I can imagine, him to be able to say those words to you
Mhm.
meant a lot to him, and he probably was full when he said what he said. Ed, two questions. In this, in Newark, when we do um oh good lord, we do programs about Harriet. We have a young actress who has also embodied Harriet, and she's usually a part of those programs. Did we get was she a- did they have the opportunity to have her there, Ed? She's
No,
usually at the
I have no
I don't think
idea
so.
if she was there.
You
Uh-huh.
know, I don't think that they had anyone
You know what
enacted.
I'm talking about, Zaid? The sister, she does the.
I know who you're
Go ahead.
talking about. Yeah,
Okay. So we don't know if she was there. Well, she would have performed
I
if she
wasn't
was there.
there, so I wouldn't know. I just wasn't
Oh,
there.
okay.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. She would have
I wish
Now,
I
performed if
had
she
you
was
there.
there. Okay.
yes, I wish we could have seen her. We did see the poet though. She was also very moving. Uh, through her words about Anne Harriet. All
Who
of
was the
them
poet, Ed?
had given me, yes. All of them had given us all a little input as far as Aunt Harriet was concerned, and what Aunt Harriet was about. And
And
I
who
know
was
she
the
was.
poet?
Who was the poet, Michelle?
You
Remember?
muted, Ed.
I'm looking it up right now.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay. Sorry
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
I
And,
admit I
that's
had
okay.
work. Some of us, gotta work.
and you know what's interesting? If you're familiar with Ava DuVernay, Ava,
Uh,
if watching her work, we have seen to see how what you're doing and to see how she brings stories like what she was doing this season in Queen Sugar. She taught us um, the importance of learning our legacy, and just to hear what you have taken on. And that was one of the characters in Queen Sugar. She took on like her mother's she took on what her mother was in terms, if you would say, the family historian, and how big of a blessing that is to be able to do that. And I remember listening to a historian one day, and this was like during Women's History Month, and she said she gave us a practice to do, and she wanted us to be able to go back and tell 5 generations. So I would be like, my name is Donna, the daughter of Francis, who is the daughter of Savannah, who is the
yes,
daughter of, and exercises like that helps you get
yes,
to know
it
your
does.
family, and it's important. And because our communities aren't like they used to be, where we used to all be right with each other. Grandmother three, I know, growing up, we basically had like 3 to 4 generations right in the household, and we
Yes.
don't live like that anymore. So a lot of information is lost. So God bless
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Mhm.
Thank
mouthful,
you
Donna.
very much. And
That's a
another
mouthful,
thing,
Donna.
as far as family history, it's all through our legacy of our own culture, or our own Black people's history. We didn't have a lot of paperwork like back in 1800s, 1700s. They didn't keep any work. They didn't keep any paperwork on us or on our ancestors. So it made it very hard. There was a lot of times where I kept,
Moratorium, yeah.
trying to look for certain documentation and stuff like that. Never able to find any. Never able to find any pictures on any relatives of mine and stuff like that.
A lot of us
Searching the
didn't have
family
birth
tree and so
certificates.
forth.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
made it very hard. It makes it very hard to research family history, but I think it's worthwhile. And I think we
Right.
need to also make sure that our young folks, our young
Right.
children, also start to learn and get information from their family, even if it's about their grandmother and
Right.
grandfathers. Um, once they have that information, that's at least a stepping stone for them to
Right.
start to search. So that's what I'm more concerned about. I want our young kids to start getting an interest in finding about their family roots, and it can be for both for children and for adults. So,
And maybe
yeah,
that could be your little side project to tell kids
hey, I
on
can
how
do
to
it.
do,
I
because our chairman from our organization, one of our organizations, tasked us with, when we go home for Thanksgiving, put the phones down, find the elder in the room, and
That's
interview
it.
them. Because when
Hmm.
that elder leaves, that information goes with them. So
Yes,
it's
it does.
really important. So yeah, that
Mhm.
would be, a nice
I would
project
love
to
to.
do, like
Yeah.
how to, and and maybe the questions that you can ask them. And
Hmm.
it's really important because it just, and just, I'm born in 67, and I we were talking to one of our professors, and I think Professor Linda Carter, she said she was 10 years old when we talk about the years that Black women got the right to vote, I mean, you got people living right now who possibly almost died, and or they know somebody who did die, so that I could just walk into a booth and have
Yes,
the right to vote.
that's
But they
right.
don't know that,
They don't know it.
and then they take that for granted. Like, I'll vote. I'm not voting because that ain't for me. And
Yeah.
like, what you? But your
Hmm.
auntie died, so that it
Right.
couldn't be for you.
But
Yeah.
I
So,
think once the children learn our history, we got to take that initiative to let our children know what our history is,
right.
and we have to take them aside
Right.
and sit them down and actually have a conversation.
Right.
Because until that happens, you're going to have it like that, where they think that, oh, well, that doesn't pertain
Mhm.
to me. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Well, your side project, we gotta wait for that one down too on how to. Because I hear you
Okay.
talking about it, and it's
And
just,
one of the things,
go ahead, Odette. I'm sorry.
one of the things I wanted to, no, that's okay, talk about was the fact that you're going to learn more history as you continue to do more research. You're going to learn more about
Hmm.
Harriet Tubman as well. One of the things that
Yeah.
came up in the most recent biographers is the fact that Tubman's birthday was
Hmm.
probably 3 days from now, was probably around March 13th. That's something that Harriet Tubman died not knowing,
Hmm.
for sure.
Not knowing.
But
That's right.
because of the research that was done, looking at the records of the slave owners,
Hmm.
they could tell that um, a um, a person was called to bring a baby. What's the word? Midwife
Midwife. Hmm.
was called at a certain time, and paid like $2 or $3. Not that she got the money, but the slave owner probably got the money
Yeah.
for the delivery of Harriet Ross's child. And so, given that time period,
Hmm.
they figured it had to be Harriet Tubman that was born at that time, and it was
Hmm.
be about March 13th. That would be her birth date. So that means that if she died on March 10th, 1913, she
Hmm.
probably died a few days before her 91st, I think, birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
91st. Um, more probably like around 92 or 93.
92, right.
Yeah, or
Hmm.
93. Yes. Now, did you have a
Who's the
document or something that
biographer in that?
states the birth date on there, or?
No, Kate, I used a lot of expert um, work that had been done, research that had been done over the years by the likes of Kate Clifford Larson.
Mhm.
And she, traveled to a lot of these different places and found the documents that
Mhm.
basically on
Mhm.
these plantations
I am gonna
that
say.
basically um, detailed
Oh, do you have a
that
question?
information. The fact that Stewart,
Oh,
who plantation they lived on at the time,
yes,
um,
yes. Mhm.
he actually called for a midwife, and it's documented because they keep
Mhm.
ledgers. So it was documented in these
Yeah.
ledgers
Yeah.
that he paid for a midwife at a
Mhm.
particular time for a
Yeah.
particular enslaved person who is
Yeah.
named who was named um, Harriet Ross.
Yes.
So they had that documented, and so they figured that was probably the time that she was born.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you
Well,
kind of use all these things to put the pieces of the puzzle together.
yes, yes,
But
because what we primarily try to do is we primarily try to connect the dots, all the dots that we know of. And those dots then create a sound foundation for the story. The only thing that we have some reservation about in terms of what Kate finds, not that she's not an excellent researcher and compiler of connecting the dots, but sometimes it's at uh, it's at a difference of what we think we're finding. And with regard to the birth certificate or birth statement, the only question that we have is that she doesn't take in consideration that there may have been another sister who was born around the same time. So I'll leave it at that. And um, there are just also other little things along the way that we have found discrepant information. Not to say that she's wrong, but to simply say that when you have family members doing their research and in a position to do research, I mean, I have a master's in psychological research. The point is, it's all about the methodology, it's about the theory, it's about the analysis, and it's about coming up with a probable conclusion that's very possible. And in some instances, we think we've come up with another interpretation. So I'll leave it at that.
Let me
Can
yeah,
I ask a
one more.
question?
Okay, go.
I apologize, but being that she just brought up, Kate Larson and some of the discrepancies, there were some people had some issues too with the number of times that is said that she went back and forth, or the number of people
Yes,
that were brought into
yes,
freedom. And
yeah.
so Kate
And we,
has it more at 13 trips, which she kind of documented all the trips and the
mhm.
people that were
but,
brought
but,
out
but,
of
but, but, but
Mississippi.
how would she document all of the trips when all of the trips were clandestine? She could not possibly
About
document
that.
all of the trips.
About
She
that.
can't possibly document the total number of people. This is like a whole other show because I know that we're ready to get off. But those are the kinds of things where from doing research that researchers really basically regurgitate what other researchers say. They don't necessarily go in and actually do the research themselves, professor to professor to professor. They're really reiterating information that they've learned from their colleagues. And what I'm saying is, it's not that she's not telling the truth, but there are other ways to interpret those numbers. And the family believes it was well over 70 slaves and what she's going to say is, well, you can't believe the family because they don't really do the research. What you can believe is that there are a number of other ways to interpret those numbers. And so I just want to leave it at that.
Well, before
And
you leave it, I want to ask one more. Have you
okay.
have you spent any time in Martha's Vineyard?
Yes.
Okay, because I just wanted to ask because she had Harriet had the relationship with Frederick Douglass, correct?
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know that they have a lot of information. So, and if you do something, we definitely want to know about that because sometimes we go up there, and if you're doing anything, I know like in August when you they generally do like the whether it
Yes.
be book signing or discussions, please let
Yes.
us know because we would love to come sit in and
Yes.
listen, you know,
Yes,
to something.
we can try to arrange that. My family and I go every summer. We have been for the
Okay.
last almost 25 years, but we normally go in July, and most
Okay.
of our brothers and sisters and the HBCUs and fraternities and sororities usually go in August. And
Right.
so one of these days we're going to try to switch it up a little bit and go in August and try to arrange the same kind of things you're talking about.
Now, are you just relaxing or do you take a day and do some discussions while you're there?
Well, we have done that in the past, and we can
Okay.
certainly do that. We can certainly do that, and as we go forward. So
Well,
that's
let
not a
us know
problem.
because we would love to support you on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. That's
Absolutely.
And I
wonderful.
would love
Thank
an
you.
opportunity to just sit and talk with you if, because I have not been up to the Auburn site yet. I've
Oh
been
my
to the
gosh.
homestead in Maryland. My
Well,
my um my cousin was in Auburn at one point. She actually is a playwright who
oh,
did a play called Harriet's Return some years ago,
oh,
and so she still revisits it from time to
yeah.
time. but she did go there. I have not yet been there, and I really want to go there sometime. So I would love an opportunity to meet with you and talk to you more.
We can make that happen.
So why don't we
Yes, we can
just
make
why,
that
why don't
happen.
we just say thank you to both of these ladies? They stayed a little later.
And
We
before we
appreciate
say
y'all.
thank you, you know we got to ask them that question.
Go ahead.
We have
Okay.
to ask you the question. This is a hip hop political show. And while you're out doing this work and research, we would like to know, is there any hip hop artist or individual or group that you listen to that inspires you?
Oh wow. Do you know the answer to that, A?
Fire.
I think my son would be able to answer that question better than I could, but
Or yeah, or you know what? We like to say hip hop, but or is it? But we're also, and we realize that hip hop artists they sample music that goes back many generations. So if not a hip hop artist, is there some artists that you listen to that gets you when you're writing, researching that
Well,
inspires?
let me just get them off the hook and give them a cheat answer. It's
Okay,
gonna be real easy. Queen Latifah.
okay,
yes.
How about
okay.
Right. We don't have to rack our brain because
there
she's
you
right
go?
there.
She'll always be
Okay.
our favorite.
Yes.
No,
Okay.
there's their answer.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Edward.
Yep,
That helps us out
absolutely.
because we
So
definitely know her. Yes.
there you go. So if you ever go on another hip hop political radio talk show, what you'll be able to say, oh, she's absolutely our favorite
That's right. That's right.
because
And
she's
she
the
she
voice
absolutely is.
behind the monument, you know.
Right.
That's
Right.
right.
Right. Right.
So that'll be
Yes.
easy to
Yes.
remember. So
Yes.
listen, Michele, we want to thank you and Adriana. We
Okay.
appreciate you
Here's
taking the
Adrian.
time. Adrian, we appreciate y'all
It's an honor to
taking
have
the
you.
time
We
and
Adrian,
appreciate it.
Adrian,
spending
when you
time with us.
speak, I just when you were speaking and your cadence, your style reminded me of Ruby D so much. I was just looking at you speak, and then I was just watching her do that poem about women last night. You just reminded me so much of her.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I appreciate that.
See,
But I
that's a
would
whole
like to
nother
say thank you
question. I
to
love Ruby D's
everybody in
portrayal.
having us.
Uh,
Thank you for having us
It's been
yesterday.
an honor. It's been
A-
an honor.
And it's been nice to talk to you this evening as well. And we hope to talk to you soon.
and
Yep.
get some rest. And thank you for extending yourself because we know you sisters are tired. But thank you. This is what love lets you do the work. So thank you
That's
so
right.
much.
Hold on. Michelle's going to say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. And for all of you that we get a chance to speak to each other individually and or in your travels, I'd be more than happy to. And we appreciate you.
Thank you. We
We
appreciate
appreciate
Okay.
it.
it.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Salute. Salute. Salute.
Okay. How do we get off? Bye-bye.
We're not going. That's right.
Yeah.
Ned,
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to
I didn't know we
meet
was gonna get you because I didn't
beautiful
hear
women.
back from you, but you got the inside hook on that little brother you got. See?
Yeah, I did, and I was on the plane. I'm back in Jersey, and you know,
Are you at
and I'm gonna
Jonathan?
see you tomorrow, Zaid.
Yeah, that's what's getting. I was getting ready to get to that. Yeah, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
weird space for me because the war is like if I look like a fish out of water, throw me back in the water because
Look,
I can count on my hand whenever I've received an award.
and it's long overdue, and that's why we're doing this, and it's interesting.
Why don't you tell us
Adrian mentioned
about the award? Tell us
Yeah.
about
Tell us
how that
about it.
works.
well, the Essex County Civic Club has been giving these the Crispus Addicts Luncheon for over 50 years now, and hosting it, and it's been a fundraiser. And for the past few years, we've been fundraising in the name of Florence Johnson, who was president of the Essex County Civic Club for some time. We are raising money for our high school seniors, and we've been doing that for the past couple of years now. This is going into the third year. And we also use the Crispus Attucks Luncheon as an opportunity to honor those people who are in the community who have been doing great work in the metro area. And this year, we are honoring the great Lawrence Ham, the Thelma Pennell Dantzler, who's the mother of Philip Pennell, who was murdered by Gary Spath over 30 years ago, 16-year-old. Deborah Smith Gregory, president of the Newark chapter of the NAACP. And last but not least, the great Zaid Muhammad, who has been working in the struggle for as long as I remember. I mean, I remember back. Yeah. Marching. And you were a different person back then. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you were a different person. It was ugly. You were a little rough on the edges. But you have, but you are strong.
So you trying to say, Zaid, calm down a little bit, huh? Told him to calm down.
See, calm down is the wrong word, probably. He's not calm down. He's more refined. He's more refined. But we are so proud of him and all that he's done. And from the
all I've ever did is protect people like Lawrence Ham and Deborah Smith Gregory and Thelma Dance. That's all I ever did.
Right. Black Panthers, the new Black Panthers, which is actually where I first met you, really, with your involvement with that. And then, of course, with Mumia Abu Jamal, in terms of bringing awareness to political prisoners and what's going on with them, police brutality. I
had to fight with being here tonight because we're in the streets of Patterson like right now.
Right. And as we were you finishing that?
I probably should be because I know you have to move on, but I can go on and talk about Zaid and everything he's been doing.
So I just want go ahead. Did you?
So tomorrow, it's going to be tomorrow noon at Libretti's, and tickets are $85, and we're hoping that you can still come. Just let me know, like tonight, that you want to come. We're trying not to take money at the door, but we will.
And so Libretti's at what time?
12 noon.
It starts at 12 noon at Libretti's.
And we'll have the information.
And where's that located at?
In Orange, New Jersey.
That's on Nassau Street in Orange. Right. You could Google Libretti's.
Right off of Scotland Road, down in the valley where the green grass grows.
Yeah, Brittany does a fundraiser.
I would like to say, I just want to close something I just came across. And how appropriate. So give me a second. And today is day 10 of 30. Harriet, one of our greatest human beings of all time, one of our greatest military figures of all time. Chairman Mayo said very plainly, destroy your enemy, preserve yourself. How many casualties on our side can you tie to her on the battlefield? Look upon her and be renewed. She left us for the land of the ancestors on this day, March 10, 1913. The artwork, which you can see on my Facebook page, is by Larry Collins, but the words are by Baba Zaid. He said he in the background. That sounds like my work.
That's right.
That is my work. Okay, that's my last words. Go ahead.
So listen, Zaid, you got any last words before we close this out, my brother?
Hey, this is Harriet's day. Hey, this was enormous. We had a great show. I mean, just the run of the show was excellent. The first segment had blended into the second segment, a good intergenerational conversation on Black and Brown unity. We were able to tolerate Conrad another hour. I'm teasing, right?
Yeah.
Because if it was me and him, we would have been battling. You know?
Yeah.
But bringing to this space, you know, the living lineage of Harriet Tubman with our own lineage and the great Annette Alston, you know, the Alston legacy and her own contribution to the appreciation and the documentation of Harriet Tubman's legacy is an enormous way to spend this day, which happens to be the 110th anniversary of her going to the land of the ancestors. This is absolutely heavy and awesome, and I'm very, very proud of each and every one of you to be associated with you.
Yep. So you have any last words on that? Anything you want to say?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to meet the great grandnieces of
yeah.
and to be on with you all and have another opportunity to talk about Sister Harriet. So
yeah, I had breakfast with them this morning, and just
really
really
you been holding out on us, man.
Yeah.
Just really two amazing people, and you know, there's going to be some spectacular stuff that's going to happen with those ladies and around that particular monument that I can't share right now, but it is going to be awesome for this city, and the fact that Mayor Barack and that entire city council took that up, and what Jonathan is getting ready to play right now is awesome. Just in terms of what she says and what Mayor Baraka, you know, says in terms of that. You know, John, you should back it up if you can to Mayor Baraka. He's going to introduce her, but you know, he says some powerful stuff too. You know.
As you're whining, I have to say this. I had the honor and privilege of lifting up Harriet Tubman at a UN subcommittee meeting today on police.
Hold on a second. John is saying something. What you saying, John?
This isn't the full thing.
Oh, okay.
Spotlight, so there's only going to be parts of it in snippets.
Then just play her. You can just play Michelle's part then, if you want.
Tubman, Michele Jones Galvin. During a press conference, Galvin discussed the monument's importance to the city that played a critical role in the Underground Railroad.
And Harriet said, I reasoned this out in my mind. There was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death.
That's right.
If I could not have one, I would have the other.
That's right.
And no man should take me alive. I know that the monument will inspire future generations to take action when they see injustice.
The monument is a result of a partnership between the city of Newark and Audible. Actress, rapper.
I think that's what you were talking about, Ed, right?
Yeah, so that's why I told you, John, to go to the city's page, because it was all there, uncut, what the mayor said, what she said, which was absolutely awesome. I mean, it was very short; it wasn't long at all. But you know,
it should air tonight.
Yeah, you know, and that's why I was telling John earlier, because I did tell them you were going to play that, John. So I'm sure at some point that level of disappointment is going to come through. We're
going to blame it on John.
They can always find the website, man. We played the part. They know where it is.
Well, yeah, but we
are past that. So we definitely want to. We should all be real technically savvy. So we should.
Yeah, you're right about that, Jonathan.
we want to end this though, because it's after 9. I know we all got stuff to do. And we're going way past. So how are we gonna let's end this well. Let's end this well. So how do you want to end this show?
I just dropped it in the chat.
Oh, we've ended. Everybody said their last. We said our last words.
Okay.
So we just violating every airspace rule we that's in the book.
What's that?
And it's not because of Donna, because I was in a timely fashion.
Yeah, you got
yes,
me
absolutely. You got us on time as well.
Okay.
Right, so
all right.
So,
until next week.
Until next week. This is a great show.
Great show.
And
we'll see some of y'all tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.